From Keene, the Shire, the Liberty Media capital of the world, this is Daryl W. Perry, host of FPP Radio News for Friday, August 24th, 2018. Silver is trading at $14.67 per ounce. Gold is valued at $1,193 per ounce. Zencash is trading at $20, and the average price of Bitcoin is $6,524. Antiwar.com reports a day after both the Afghan government and U.S. government declined offers to attend, the Taliban has announced they have accepted Russia's invitation to a multinational peace talks to be held next month in Moscow. The Taliban issued a statement saying it is their intention to send a delegation led by the head of their political office, which is based in Qatar. The U.S. recently held talks with Taliban from that office. The Taliban's acceptance is a significant boost for the talks.
Looking for quality auto parts for your vehicle? Shop one of the 72 St. Louis area O'Reilly Auto Parts stores. You'll find we have convenient locations, thousands of brand name parts in stock, extended store hours, everyday low prices, and well-trained professional parts people. O'Reilly Auto Parts. Better parts, better prices every day.
Hi, welcome to this Subway ad for footlongs starting at $4.99. How do you want it?
Yeah, I'll take a blast of death metal, please.
You got it.
Now Subway, full of black horse and spicy Italian, cold cut couple, triple marinara, or veggie delight, starting at $4.99 each. Ooh, I got jalapenos in my eyes. Subway, make it what you want.
Limited time at participating shops. Prices vary and are higher in Alaska and Hawaii. Extras additional plus tax. No additional discounts. Coupons applied.
UPI reports as California firefighters battled the largest fires in state's history. Verizon slowed wireless data speeds to a crawl, making it almost impossible for emergency personnel to use
Limited time at participating shops. Prices vary and are higher in Alaska and Hawaii. Extras additional plus tax. No additional discounts. Coupons applied.
Said emergency personnel heavily rely on
UPI reports as
to monitor fast-moving acknowledge and coordinate resources. The fire department has an unlimited government plan with Verizon, but the company slowed its throttle data speed once the agency reached a certain threshold, according to Bowden in an August 20th court filing. Bowden said the internet has become an essential tool in providing fire and emergency response, particularly for events like large fires, which require the rapid deployment and organization of thousands of personnel and hundreds of fire engines, aircraft, and bulldozers. Keeping emergency personnel connected requires a lot of data. While battling the Mendocino complex fire, Bowden said his department's mobile communications center sent and received 5 to 10 gigabytes of data through a wireless router daily. During that time, Verizon reduced speeds that slowed service of the equipment to dial-up speeds. Santa Clara County Fire Captain Bill Murphy told CNN simple tasks like sending an email or updating a Google document were almost impossible. You can support FPP Radio by joining the Fans program. Fans are friends, allies, and numerous supporters. Fans help FPP afford to produce more original content. You can join the Fans program for as little as $1 per month through Patreon and get perks like ad-free versions of FPP Radio News and Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com. Reuters reports a federal judge sentenced former U.S. intelligence contractor Reality Winner on Thursday to more than 5 years in prison after she admitted leaking a top-secret report on Russian interference in U.S. elections to a media outlet. Winner, who has spent already nearly 2 years in jail, pled guilty in June to passing the National Security Agency report to The Intercept in 2016. One of her attorneys, Titus Nichols, said Winner is receiving credit for the time she spent in pretrial confinement. During a hearing in Winner's hometown of Augusta, Georgia, Judge James Hall approved her lawyer's request for a 63-month sentence, followed by 3 years of supervised release, according to Nichols. It was one of the longest sentences ever given to someone for illegally disclosing government information, according to Nichols. Winner's attorneys said in a statement the sentence and accompanying plea agreement both reflect that Reality recognizes that actions have consequences and that she has learned from her mistakes and is prepared to accept the consequences of her actions. Winner admitted to intentionally printing a copy of the intelligence report in her office and mailing it to the news outlet. She was indicted on a single federal count of willful retention and transmission of national defense information, a felony under the Espionage and Censorship Act that carries a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison. Betsy Reed, editor-in-chief of The Intercept, said in a statement that Winner should be honored and that her sentencing and other prosecutions of whistleblowers were attacks on freedom of speech and of the press. This has been FPP Radio News, online at fppradio.com.
Your NBC Sports Radio update starts now.
Super Bowl hangover? I'm Jeff Biggs, and the big question of the NFL so far this preseason, what is up with the Eagles? The defending Super Bowl champs have yet to score a touchdown, losing last night in Cleveland 5-0. And during the game, Aaron Andrews reported on Fox that head coach Doug Peterson said he was disappointed with Super Bowl MVP Nick Foles. And then after the game, Peterson pushed back.
Not Nick, offensively. We had 6 possessions, we had 2 interceptions, 2 fumbles, we had a sack safety, and we had a turnover on down. So that's an offensive performance. I was displeased with the way our first offense executed. I'm disappointed in the offense. I don't want to single out one player, so don't put this all on Nick. I'm disappointed in the offense. And it's not what you want, obviously, in the third preseason week. You know, listen, it's one of those things where we still keeping things very, very vanilla. We've got one more preseason game and then turn our attention to Atlanta on week 1.
Yeah, week 1 against the Falcons, now less than 2 weeks away. Tonight, week 3 of the preseason continues with 6 more games, including the Giants, the visiting team against the Jets at MetLife. Saquon Barkley is not going to play. The Patriots will hit Carolina. The Vikings will host the Seahawks, and the Packers are in Oakland to take on the Raiders. Aaron Rodgers is not going to play, but his former receiver, Jordy Nelson, will.
It'll be fun to see those guys. It's kind of enjoyable. That's a preseason game, so we can have some fun and get in and get out.
Friday baseball begins next hour with daytime action at Wrigley as the Cubs take on Matt Harvey and the Reds. Tonight, the Red Sox are at Tampa Bay, and the red-hot Cardinals will begin a weekend showdown at Coors Field. Golf round 2 of the Northern Trust. Good start for Phil Mickelson, who was alone atop the leaderboard at one point at 8 under, had a couple of late bogeys. Lefty is done for the day at 6 under par, 1 shot behind the leader, Patrick Cantlay, who's at 7 under. Tiger Woods has just teed off. I'm Jeff Biggs, NBC Sports Radio.
The Tom Woods Show, episode 1216.
Prepare to set fire to the index card of allowable opinion. Your daily dose of liberty education starts here. The Tom Woods Show.
Folks, when you're on social media defending the libertarian position on health care, you get called all kinds of fun names. Well, I've got just the antidote. My free ebook, Your Friends Are Wrong About Healthcare. Check it out at yourfriendsarewrong.com. Hi, everybody. Tom Woods here. Well, I've got a neat little talk for you today. Oh, my goodness. This one's about 6 years old. You can see how long it took me to start my podcast. Early on in this one, I say, I think I'll probably have my own show. Yeah, it didn't happen for like a year and a half. So when on my entrepreneurship email list, if you're on that one, when I tell you once in a while that some of my best advice is just go ahead and do whatever the thing is that you're planning on doing, instead of waiting until every duck is in a row, so to speak, just understand that's coming from hard experience. Okay. I mean, I had the idea for this show so long before it actually occurred, before I actually launched it. It's embarrassing to look back at this talk from something like April 2012. The episodes didn't start getting cranked out till September 2013. And I'm sounding like I'm on the verge of doing it. Oh, my goodness. So that's just, that's not good. And the second thing is, and I make another mistake early on. I say that the song Siberian Khatru from Yes came out in 1971. Of course, that's not true. That's when they released the Fragile album. Siberian Khatru is on Close to the Edge from 1972. What's the matter with me? However, the rest of the stuff is on target. This is an event in Philadelphia, sponsored by the 10th Amendment Center, and I'm talking about state nullification of unconstitutional federal laws, and I'm talking about decentralization and civilization and how they are linked together. A lot of interesting stuff, I think. And I feel like every once in a while I want to pull one of these out of the vault to keep some of my issues that I don't talk about as much these days, keep them still burning a bit. And nullification certainly is one of those. I wrote a book called Nullification in 2010 not about jury nullification, about the powers of the states to nullify unconstitutional federal laws. This was Jefferson's view. And I think that's a pretty darn good book. There are some historical documents as appendices in the end, and I guarantee you've never seen these documents before. I guarantee they were in no documentary reader that was in any school you attended or is in any school around the country, really. But they are historical documents all the same. I dug them up. They're real. And they show that I'm not making this stuff up. It's just that nobody knows about these documents. So I dug them up, put them in there, doggone it. And in particular, I think it's 4, has some of the most helpful American history themes anybody can get, in which I talk about the argument for the so-called compact theory of the Union as opposed to the nationalist theory of the Union. The compact theory is so overwhelmingly, obviously correct. But that chapter is where I really, for the first time, laid it out systematically. I had written about it here and there, but I had never done a systematic overview and defense of it. And I think it's the best short such summary. There are longer ones, there are book-length ones from the 19th century, but in terms of a 21st century work that gives you the information you need to defend this position and to understand it, I think it's the best thing that there is. Now, I'm not really bragging there because it's probably the only one, but I just mean if you're interested in this stuff, which you darn well should be, I think that chapter is going to just save you a lot of grief. It's got all the information you need, all the history to show that you're right in the way you think about the American Union. Now, it doesn't matter if you're an anarcho-capitalist or not. Stephan Kinsella is an anarcho-capitalist, but he's interested in this stuff too, just from a historical perspective. Which one is the correct view? I like to be correct, and I think this one is the correct view, that the constituent parts of the Union are the states, and the United States was not meant to be one giant blob ruled indivisibly from the center. That's just not true. And the states do have the ability to resist, and so there's a lot of good stuff in there. So if you like the ideas in this talk, then you will enjoy that book. You can get the audiobook version for free when you sign up for the great Audible offer at tomwoodsaudio.com. By the way, when it comes to audiobooks, sometimes the people who read them, it's like they're reading the instructions for a microwave oven. You just don't understand why they have to be so dull. So I actually wound up narrating one of my books, and that's my book, Real Dissent, which is my favorite one of my books, by the way. And if you don't have any of my books, I don't make much money on books, but I do think they help people. That's why I wrote them. And I think you would enjoy reading them if you like this show. And in particular, I think Real Dissent is the best thing I've done. It's because it's a bunch of short pieces from, probably the past 10 years or more on a variety of topics, a lot of hitting the neocons, just really good, like responses to libertarian critics, or critics of libertarianism. And there are some really delicious and fun smackdowns in there. And I think you really get a kick out of it. So Real Dissent is the best one I've got. And I actually did the reading of that one. So if you go to tomwoodsaudio.com and you type in Real Dissent, that'll actually be me reading that book. And it's a little bit more, it's not crazy, but it's a little bit more lively than the typical audiobook reader. Just say that. All right. That's that. I really hope you enjoy this talk. Here we go.
This is a dangerous man, citizen. Avert your eyes. Don't you dare listen to this man. Avert your eyes, citizen. He's extreme. He's dangerous. He's crazy. He's not respectable.
Thanks, everybody. Wow. All right, you get extra credit in my eyes if you know what song that is. Anybody know what that is? Yes, that's right. Siberian Khatru by Yes from 1971. All right. Woo! That is good. I've always wanted to be introduced to that music. That is great. I don't even know what a Khatru is, but that's what a Siberian one sounds like. All right, well, thanks, everybody. I want to say a special thank you to the Foundation for a Free Society and to the 10th Amendment Center for making this event possible, to Michael Bolden for introducing me 3 minutes ahead of schedule. And I was kind of, putting the last minute thoughts in, and I guess those thoughts are not going to be had. But and then thanks to all the co-sponsors. I mean, a lot of groups in this area came together to make this event possible, and that is very, very heartwarming, and very glad to see so many people who are going to take their Saturday and say, you know what, I'm going to take this Saturday, roll it up into a ball, and just throw it out the window in the form of spending it inside a hotel all day listening to these people, because you know the significance of what's going on here. Now, if only, this is great. Now, next year, we got to double this, and then we're going to double it after that, and then we'll start having some fun. But this is wonderful to see such a great cadre being built up, thinking about these ideas. I have a little bit of good news going on here. Starting sometime, maybe next month or something. A lot of people have been saying, because I sometimes fill in for Peter Schiff on the Peter Schiff Show, people say, well, why don't you get your own show? So, okay, so it looks like it's going to work out that I'll have some type of show. So I put up thank you. So I had to outfit my home office to make this possible. So I put up a chip in for here. Look, I hope you guys can help me out because, I mean, I'm going to be doing the show for free. It's hard for me to be sort of out of pocket. If we can all chip in a little something to make this possible. In one afternoon, the target was reached. I was able to get everything I needed. And then the very last minute, it was $600 left to go. It's just incredible the miracles the internet makes possible. Some guy from Norway contributed the final $600. I mean, I was just shocked. I mean, without the internet, think of how different life would be without the internet. Without the internet, that guy would have blown that $600 on a whole lot of Norwegian crap. I don't know, Viking helmets, what do they buy in Norway? But instead, I got my show thanks to this, so it's really, really quite something. The other thing I want to point out is that I've been doing a lot of work on this subject of nullification since I wrote a book on nullification. I've been able to talk a lot about it thanks to Michael Bolden and all these guys, Jason Rink, who have helped to make this tour possible, and that's been a lot of fun. But I've noticed that the political left, you have to hand it to them, they believe in their principles, because a lot of times they say that what we need for the economy is more government spending. More government spending on make-work jobs, and that will boost and stimulate the economy. Well, I have to respond to a lot of inane criticisms of nullification, and I am now of the belief that those articles are actually a disguised form of make-work for me. They're writing these inane things to put me to work, to give me something to do, and for heaven's sake, I can't help myself. Somebody says some inane thing, I got to respond to it. And that's why half the time people will email me and say, you won't believe what this bum is saying. You got to go respond to him. But if I don't have the time to do it, I can't even open the email. I can't even open the link because it's just going to eat away at me all day. All the things I could be saying in response to this. I can't do it to myself. I won't be sleeping. And then inevitably I'll wind up writing the article anyway, and I'll be groggy the next day. Horrible. So it's been great to have the opportunity to engage people in discussion about this, both pro and con. Now, I think at the end of the day, I think we probably already know what the concept is, right? I mean, at this point, if we don't know what the concept is, then this has been one big stinking failure. But for the sake of the, presumably YouTube audience that may view this, I'm going to give you like the 3-minute, and I'm actually going to look at my watch here. I'm going to give you the 3-minute overview of what we're talking about here. And because basically what I try to do each time now, at Fort Worth, when we kicked off this tour in September 2010, or August 2010, I gave basically the thorough overview. Like, here's the whole deal. And I gave that, and that's up there on my website permanently, tomwoods.com. It's one of the videos on the homepage. That's there. The problem with YouTube is that everybody can watch it. So then you go give another speech, people say, that's the same speech he gave in Fort Worth. So it's very hard. Like, if you're a stand-up comedian, good luck in the age of YouTube. I already heard this guy's routine. Like, what is he supposed to come up with new jokes every single night? So I got to think of, how do I talk about nullification differently when it's still the same thing each time? How do I do that? So what I'm going to do is, as I say, just let's go through the basics, and then I'm going to try and tackle it from a different angle each time. So, all right, so here we go. So according to my watch, I'm at it's like 6:02 and a half or something, kind of thing like that. So basically the idea is this. So it comes down to the insight that the federal government cannot be expected to limit itself. Now I can understand somebody being skeptical of this in 1790. But, we have a little bit of experience in this area now, and I think this is rather an understatement, if anything. So something outside itself has to do the limiting. It can't be the courts. Oh, the courts will put things right. Oh, let's everybody wait with bated breath to hear what our overlords have to say about what our Constitution means. Jefferson's view was that the Constitution was written in a way that the average person could understand it. You don't need some deep insight that you have to go into debt for 3 years to acquire. None of that. Just read the words. Read, and also read what was said about them, what said about those words in the state ratifying conventions. And in fact, how has the leave it to the courts strategy worked? Most of the time when the federal government gets away with something, it cites the Commerce Clause. The Commerce Clause, it takes up about this much space in the Constitution. It takes up this much space in how the federal government justifies its activities. And in 60 years, starting in the 30s, going to the 1990s, the Supreme Court declared one federal law unconstitutional on Commerce Clause grounds. The Gun-Free School Zones Act of 1990. They combed everything. That was the only thing they could find the federal government had done wrong. So if you like a strategy where every 60 years your liberties might be protected, then by all means, don't listen to anything I have to say. Don't buy the nullification book. Don't do any of this. Or maybe twice, if you're lucky, twice in 60 years. Now, it's just unlikely this is going to happen. And Jefferson and his followers believed that more likely was the outcome that whereby the federal courts would just rubber stamp what the rest of the federal government was doing. No surprise there. So what logically bears the responsibility of keeping the federal government in check? Well, the states. The states created the federal government. I go through all the steps of this in nullification. The states are the sentinels that will say, now, wait a minute, in this particular state, we're just not letting you do this. And this it just boils down to common sense. It really is common sense. If the federal government is doing something that it's not authorized to do, you don't wait around fruitlessly for years hoping that somehow it'll change, because it doesn't. So we're going to try this. That's what it boils down to. The insight that the federal government cannot be allowed to have a monopoly on determining what its powers are. And the critics of nullification, they're against monopolies in every other aspect of life. They wouldn't want a shoe monopoly or anything else. But for some reason, on the most important issue of all, they think it's somehow antisocial to deny that we should have a monopoly. But we're saying, no. There needs to be a division of power centers and not a centralized power deciding what the powers of the federal government are. All right, I did that in about 2.5 minutes, so we're going to leave that there. So to make a long story even shorter, I'll just say that if we look through history, we find, and these are things, by the way, that you could find if you looked in the documentary histories. But typically this is not being done, or we're not learning about this in our classrooms. But I've talked a lot about, thanks to the work of Kevin Gutzman, what went on in the Virginia Ratifying Convention. The Virginia Ratifying Convention, so Virginia is going to consider whether or not to ratify the Constitution. This is 1788. And in response to some of the skeptics of the Constitution, like Patrick Henry, who was concerned that some of these seemingly open-ended clauses, like the General Welfare Clause, would in effect authorize a government of unlimited powers, it was supporters of the Constitution, the Federalists, in the Virginia Convention that said, no, don't worry about that, because number one, this is going to be a government of strictly enumerated powers. And number two, it's going to have the powers only expressly delegated to it. They use the word expressly in numerous ratifying conventions. And then George Nicholas, who became the first Kentucky Attorney General, said, and if the federal government should try to impose upon us any supplementary condition, anything that we didn't expressly agree to in this document, then we will be exonerated. Okay, well, that's pretty much what nullification is. And there you see it spelled out in the ratifying convention. So, I mean, this stuff is there. It's not like we're making this up. It's there. It's in, of course, the great resolutions of 1798, the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions of Jefferson and Madison. Like, the evidence is just overwhelming. There's a very, very, very good case historically, logically, strategically, morally. The case is just airtight for state nullification. Now, having said that, and there's so much more that can be said. But now what I want to do, this is my way of it's like the variations that Mozart wrote on Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. You know, it's all Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. But each one's kind of a clever variation until by the end you think, I think I'm going to commit an atrocity if I hear one more variation on. So I'm hoping that I'm not quite up to that level. This is my like 8th or 9th variation on Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, the nullification version. So what I want to talk about today is nullification has a special appeal, I think, for those people who have figured out certain basic truths. The first such truth is that the problem with our country today is not Barack Obama. Now, I don't mean to say Barack Obama's a great guy. I wish he'd move in next door to me. Although, actually, if he moved in next door to me, I mean, he wouldn't be president anymore. So I guess I take that back. I'll make that sacrifice for the country. But it's the whole, if it was just one bad president, we would be in a heck of a lot better position than we are now. So this whole Obama's, like every time I go to Twitter, Twitter, why am I even on it? I don't know. You can follow me, by the way, I'm Thomas E. Woods on Twitter. I don't know why I'm on, because if you wind up having any, talk about frustrating. If you've never been on Twitter, everything you type on Twitter has to be 140 characters or fewer. 140, not words, characters, like letters and spaces. So try having a debate with somebody. Oh yeah, you are a jerk, and I'm right, R-I-T-E, so I can save one character. I'm like, why am I doing this to myself? But every time, I basically on Twitter, I get a lot of people following me, and they're all different sorts of people, and I typically follow people back. I don't always have time to check them out. If they look totally insane, I don't follow them back. But basically, I follow people back. All right. So that means I get a lot of just like regular, I haven't yet seen the light, sort of mildly right of center people who are posting things about Obama's done this and Obama's done that. And I think, a lot of these people, if George W. Bush had done half those things, they would have saluted and gone along with it. No problem. No dissent would have been allowed. And, just today, somebody said to me, why is it that when Jefferson and Madison wrote the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions of 1798, and they called on the states to resist the unconstitutional Alien and Sedition Acts, why were there so many states that just said, this is an appalling doctrine and we refuse to stand with Virginia and Kentucky on this? Why were so many states so unwilling to stand with them? And I think it's a question of whose ox was being gored, because it turns out that by and large the New England states that denounced Virginia and Kentucky, how dare you suggest that you could resist an unconstitutional federal law, the New England states 10 years later, when Jefferson has imposed an embargo on shipping in New England, well, suddenly they want to nullify that. And they're they're talking all about nullification and interposing and all that. So sometimes it boils down to people just don't have principles. I just favor my views, and that's all it boils down to, where some of us think that even if a president should do something that we like, if it's unconstitutional, we don't even want him to do it. Very few people, unfortunately, are going to have that sort of level of principle. And that's our problem, because we have gotten so caught up in the cult of personality around the president and around all the presidential candidates that we wind up at each other's throats with, oh yeah, the problem with our country is the Democrats. I am so sick of that. Yes, obviously, look, any kid, any 10-year-old with a connection to the internet can see the Democrats are rotten. Like, duh. If we had one political party that was consistently good, again, we'd be in much better shape than we are now. I just cannot get over people who think Obama is the worst person ever to walk the earth, and then they go out and hold a sign for an opposing candidate whose views of government are about 7% different. Okay, I don't know if this is Robert Scott Bell's water, if it's spiked with silver or what's in here, but all right. Okay. But if I have some Popeye effect, and suddenly, then we'll know. But I mean, think about, look, I don't want to go through all we all know the history. I mean, Richard Nixon, the great conservative who gave us what? The EPA, wage and price controls, affirmative action, and he almost gave a guaranteed income to every American. And I know there are some people I'm not supposed to criticize, but what would be the fun in that? If I didn't say something that wouldn't challenge anybody in the room. I mean, come on, let's have a little fun here, criticizing people. At the end of Reagan's term, now Reagan is infallible, every candidate compares himself to Reagan. That's dangerous. That's the way the left acts toward Obama. This sort of cult of personality. He's perfect. You just wave incense in front of him, citizen. You're not worthy to speak of him. You know, we can't do that, right? Well, surely we are above that, right? In this room, we're above that sort of thing. So by the end of Reagan's terms, the budget has doubled. The tax rate reductions of the early years have been overcome by later increases and cancellation of loopholes and so on. The executive branch continues to grow in power. George H.W. Bush gives us massive new regulations, new taxes, more centralization. George W. Bush, well, let's see, Medicare Part D, No Child Left Behind, further centralization of education, spending levels unseen since Lyndon Johnson, appeal to a vast reservoir of unspecified powers in the executive branch. I mean, come on, right? And now the same people, the same geniuses who've gotten us in this spot are prepared to nominate another Bob Dole, John McCain, George W. Bush clone. And I might add parenthetically that, one good thing about George W. Bush was his foreign policy. Oh, yeah. Because I feel so much safer now that Iraq no longer has a two-bit nobody, and instead they now have a Shiite regime whose constitution pledges fidelity to the Koran. Oh, so much safer. Thank heavens we had that. And people will say, well, we couldn't have known that in advance. Yes, we could. Everybody was saying that. Every sensible conservative said that's exactly what the outcome will be, trillions of bucks later, and whoever. So anyway, the point is, what we're dealing with is two wings of the same bird of prey. And yeah. Okay, one of the wings, the people give an occasional pretty speech because they think we're a bunch of dupes who all we do is listen to pretty speeches and then pull a lever. Well, okay, I would assume that at least in this room we're not that way. But nothing pleases these people more than to see Americans divided over these trivial differences. And nothing terrifies them more than somebody who just transcends the whole fake spectrum. Nothing makes Harry Reid and Mitch McConnell kiss and make up faster than a challenge by somebody who recognizes that the problem is not the Democrats or the Republicans. The problem is the system itself. That's what scares them. So that's the first insight. The second of these central truths that I think these nullify supporters, this is what attracts us, this is what binds us together, this is why we all rally around this cause, is that there is merit in decentralized power. Decentralization is something that both wings of our bird of prey oppose. Oh, yeah. Bob Dole in 1996 said that he carried his copy of the Constitution and the 10th Amendment around in his back pocket. Back pocket, which was obviously sewn shut, which he never had access to. So we're told that really all the cool people favor centralized power, right? And only a loser would favor decentralized power. Don't we know that's stupid and backward and inefficient? And now, since the 20th century, we've seen how cool it is to have large centralized states. If we pursue nullification, you will see, if you have not seen already, the true nature of the regime, because the mainstream, so-called respectable establishment left will join hands with the mainstream respectable establishment right against us. Well, I say, bring it on, baby. Now, it is not, and you have to believe me, I am being absolutely genuine here, it is not my intention to politicize my remarks, but I do have to add that if we think of the presidential candidates right now, there is only one who would not condemn every one of you in this room as an extremist for supporting nullification. At the first moment that Keith Olbermann puts them on the spot, they will throw you under the bus. We all know it. Every one of them with one exception. Why do people support candidates who would smear and denounce them the moment they're put on the spot by Rachel Maddow? Why is that? It's like there is a nationwide Stockholm Syndrome effect at work. The whole country, somehow now we identify with the very people who are wrecking our lives. This is something I can't understand, so I'm going to just leave that aside. All right, now carrying on. Much of this prejudice against the idea of nullification, though, derives from the idea that the only way to organize society is to have a single, irresistible, infallible central authority ruling over a collection of individuals. That's the only way society can be arranged. And we dissent from that. I mean, we think that maybe there is another way of living. And in fact, there was. Through most of the history of Western civilization, that was not how political society was organized. When you look at the French Revolution, one of the major aspects of the French Revolution was flattening out and destroying all local privileges, liberties, differentiating aspects, and turning it into one single, irresistible, unbreakable blob. That was what the revolution ultimately yielded to the Western world. And since then, all the major countries have fallen in line. So instead of federations, we have centralized states everywhere. Now, when I used to be a college professor, a lot of my kids, students I should say, thought that the United States was awesome because, and here was their reason, because it's a great big country. That's what makes us so cool. We're a great big country. But there are a lot of great big countries in the world you wouldn't want to be caught dead in, right? The Soviet Union was a great big country. China's a great big country. Okay, well, China's getting better than it used to be. I mean, certainly better than during the Cultural Revolution, obviously. But the point is, there are great big countries nobody would want to live in. That's not what makes the United States great. Well, the United States was, and this is how I appeal to people who are fixated on American exceptionalism. We hear this a lot, right? America is the most awesome country in the world. But yet, a lot of people who say that are willing to sit back and watch America become exactly like every other country in the world. If the United States is supposed to be this light to the nations or something different in the world, why are we sitting back as it's being organized exactly like Britain, France, Germany, whatever? So the way I appeal to these American exceptionalist neocon types is I say, you really think the United States is supposed to be organized like France? And they think, oh my gosh, no, what have I been thinking? France? Worst possible thing. But like, the world is full of centralized states, right? What it's not full of are countries that are, like the United States was supposed to be, that are collections of societies, that are not just an undifferentiated aggregate of individuals, but are collections of self-governing peoples. That's what made the United States distinct in the world. At a time when the world was moving towards centralization, the United States was moving in the opposite direction. That this is, the United States, if you look in the Constitution, not once is the United States referred to in the singular. It is always referred to in the plural to emphasize that that's what we are. We're a collection of things. We are not one thing. As my friend Don Livingston puts it, a collection of nations is not itself a nation in the way that a collection of country clubs is not a country club. So this is what we live in is a federation of societies. But what has followed from this unthinking acceptance of this Thomas Hobbes model, where all power resides in the central authority, and if there are any powers exercised at the local level at all, they are concessions generously made by the center, but not anything that inheres in these lesser bodies. What follows from this is this kind of superstitious reverence for political bigness, the idea that giant states are like self-justifying goals. So any form of resistance to the central authority becomes viewed as being ipso facto perverse and unpatriotic. Now, in my third point would be that that I think if you realize this truth, it draws you into nullification. This prejudice in favor of large centralized states as being self-justifying goals and thinking that anybody who resists that state, a state within a state, this is unthinkable. Even though, as I say, this is exactly how European civilization was organized. You had all different jurisdictions, some of them overlapping, and their symbiotic relation all worked together to produce Western civilization. It was impossible in pre-modern Europe for any king, no matter how ambitious, to gather the authority to engage in and to impose an income tax or some of the things that we take for granted in our so-called free societies of today. But what we see, the third point, is that this prejudice is not justified. Because we look at the 20th century, What was the fruit of these large centralized states? Well, total war on a scale that had never been seen before, genocide, just case after case, totalitarian systems, and totalitarian revolutions. Now, when you talk about state nullification, people say, we have to be careful of state nullification because what if the states begin to oppress racial minorities? And I've dealt with that topic in other talks that you can find on YouTube and on my some of my resource stuff on nullification online. But look around the world. How did these wonderful centralized states, how did they treat minorities? And in the nullification documentary, I gave 4 examples, and I could give a bunch more, but I think the most telling examples are, ask the Ukrainians in the Soviet Union how they felt as a minority when they were starved to death deliberately in 1932 to 33. Wouldn't it have been better for Ukraine to be able to nullify that policy? So, I mean, in other words, it's not obvious that minorities are safer in large centralized states. So the exact opposite seems to be obvious. I myself am half Armenian, so I'm particularly sensitive to this point. Think about how the Armenians fared in the Ottoman Empire. I mean, was that just a bowl of cherries? Or, I mean, obviously, the Asians who were expelled from Uganda, or obviously the Jews in Germany. I mean, we're not even allowed to entertain these questions. We're not even supposed to ask the question. The idea that the scale, the size of the political order could even be considered is not even on the table. If you even consider it, there's something wrong with you. This is not even, all you're supposed to ask is, how much do you want the government to rip you off? That's basically what all political debates boil down to. I want them to rip me off slightly less than they are now. Yeah, let me hold that guy's sign. Yeah. How many of the great despotic figures of the 20th century ever called for power to be decentralized, or ever said we should have the power of nullification on the part of the constituent bodies? Well, I believe the question answers itself. Now, my friend Don Livingston has just edited a good book on rethinking the American Union in the 21st century, where he raises some of these interesting issues. And we should consider, when we think about ancient Greek civilization, that was composed of over 1,000 republics, which existed in an age of great empires. And yet, if we look at just ancient Athens alone, which we could compare maybe to modern-day Rhode Island, Athens, the achievements in philosophy, drama, mathematics, architecture and art, and et cetera, are still being studied and appreciated and emulated to this day. So it's not true that large-scale political societies are necessary for the cultivation of human excellence or for human flourishing. Moreover, Greece twice defeated the Persian Empire, much larger than itself, against what seemed impossible odds in the early 5th century BC in the Persian Wars. The city-state of Venice flourished for 1,200 years before being conquered by Napoleon. Switzerland has maintained its independence in the heart of a volatile Europe for 700 years. Oh, but large states bring safety and security to their people. Really? Was France a safe place to live in the 20th century? Was Britain? Was Germany? Was the Soviet Union a safe place to live in the 20th century? Was China, where the resources of a mighty state were turned against its people? And even people who are concerned about the so-called asymmetric threats said to be posed to the United States today, well, is there any reason to believe that the bumbling bureaucracies of today's mega-states would respond to these threats more effectively than would smaller polities? If so, I don't see the evidence for such a claim. Now, at some point in this century, it is likely that the U.S. population will reach 435 million people. That would be 1 million people for each of the 435 congressmen in the House of Representatives. Now, that figure was capped by Congress about 100 years ago. No matter so redistricting amounts to shuffling the 435 around the different states, but not adding new ones. In what sense could political representation possibly be meaningful any longer, if it ever had any meaning, if each congressman represents 1 million people? Is this question even again, you're crazy for considering that question. I would say you're crazy for not considering it. How can you it's absurd.
So when we think about these overlooked facts, well, suddenly it's not so open and shut, is it? That the large-scale state is to be preferred. Now, the fourth insight. The textbooks are wrong. Well, I don't even have to finish that sentence, but I'm going to. I'm going to. The textbook version says that these 435 people, we add another 100 for the senators, 535 people, they're there to legislate for the public good. And where would we be without them? Hopeless and lost, right? So these are selfless crusaders for justice. They are not in any way simply seeking their own perpetuation, these bureaucracies. No. They are just looking out for us. They're not just looking to get a bigger budget each year. They're not looking to exaggerate or perpetuate the problems they were intended to solve because thereby they will get more pilf and power. No, citizen. Nope. These people are just laboring, toiling day and night for you and me. And again, where would we be without them? Well, and this is my usual trope here. Where would we be? Well, we'd all be probably dead in a ditch. We'd be earning 3 cents an hour. Our kids would be working in mines, getting their limbs blown off, and our consumer products would all be exploding. If it weren't for OSHA, well, people would be, obviously all workers would be falling into the grinding machine, and so all of us would be eating sausages made out of some guy's leg. We wouldn't have any art in society because really, what artist would even pick up a paintbrush if he doesn't have Joe Biden paternally watching over? No scientific work would be done. I mean, on and on and on, right? That's what we're told. Now, I don't believe that stuff, okay? I think every single one of those claims is demonstrably false. But on top of it, the modern state will also blame all problems, never on itself. It's always our fault. The financial crisis, that was our fault because they weren't watching over us closely enough. If only they had been able to crack a few more skulls, they could have stopped this. Sure. We had financial crises year in, year out, time after time, but if only just a few more skulls could have been cracked. Or healthcare, well, that's because the free market caused that problem. The kids aren't learning anything. That's because why else? Our wise overlords don't have enough power. Can't crack enough skulls, can't grab enough dough. It's always something like that. It's just like in the old Soviet Union. Nothing was ever the Soviet government's fault. The bad harvest, that wasn't there. It wasn't the crazy, insane Soviet collectivization policy where you herd all these people into collective farms and they hate it and it's like a giant prison they have to work in every day and they don't enjoy the fruits of their labor. It's nothing to do with that. No, it's bad weather, citizen. Bad weather. Sabotage. But that's how they all act. Some of them not as crude as others. They all act that way. What I have done in title number 2 of my recent years, I've been writing like a book a year. People say, when's your next book coming out? I don't know. I'm surprised I'm still here. It's incredibly draining mentally to keep writing these books. So I've decided that's it. There's not going to be another one for a while. I'm going to take a rest. I can't even think about a large-scale project anymore. But that's why this book, Rollback, which was packaged all wrong, they've packaged it to sound... I produced what I think is a fairly radical manuscript, which in the old sense of the term, going back to the root. Because what I've done in here is the first sort of chapter goes into, well, here are the things that are bad about Obama. So, all right, okay, yeah, I'm with you so far. Stimulus is all wrong and the health care plan's all wrong. Okay. And the next chapter is, here's some other things. Here's why all this, the financial crisis wasn't caused by this or that or the other thing. It was caused by the crummy government and its crummy central bank. And all right, whatever. And the next chapter is, all right, now here's another thing we got to get rid of, the Federal Reserve. All right, okay, maybe, right. And the next chapter is, and then the military-industrial complex is also looting the heck out of you too. Okay, whoa. And then finally at the end... The second to last chapter is basically saying, and if I left anything out, we got to abolish that also. So that's basically what Rollback is about. It's basically saying the federal government is like a giant de-civilization agent. It corrupts and destroys everything it touches, all the while telling us how much worse things would be without it. And they've trained us to think this, to have so little confidence in ourselves. We think, well, I don't like paying taxes to Joe Biden either, but my gosh, without him, where would my kids would be dead and I'd be in a ditch. Of course they want you to think that. I mean, just put yourself in their position, right? If you were running a racket like this, wouldn't you want the public to think, without me, you'd all be dead and it would all be helpless and the captains of industry would be exploiting you with giant whatever claws and whatever?
This is exactly what you would want people to think, and this is what we've been trained to think, and that's why I did this rollback book. So basically, the two books kind of work together. So rollback is saying, here's what they're doing to us, and here's the refutation of all their crummy rationalizations for it. So every time your friend who says, oh, no, but if we got rid of the Fed, well, we'd have this or that. No, this is the point of this is to win debates so that you can say, no way, baby, we can solve these problems without these sociopaths running our lives. And then nullification is sort of saying, here's one way we can start pushing these people back. Now, one thing that nullification does help us do, so those are my 4 basic insights here. One additional thing, though, that it helps us do is as we talk about it and as we read and learn about it, we are uncovering forgotten history. And somebody today said to me, and I put it in a way that I would never have thought of, that when you study the history of nullification and the compact theory of the Union and all this stuff that goes with it, you realize this is actually really this isn't just some footnote to American history. This is actually the Rosetta Stone that decodes American history for you, that makes sense of it all, that you see the significance of things for the first time. And you look through the history of it and you realize how much is left out. Yeah, you get a passing glance at the Virginia and Kentucky resolutions of 1798 in your textbook. And even there, it's treated badly, inaccurately. It's portrayed as some sort of one-off thing Jefferson just did, in a fit of pique one day, and then that was the end of it. But you don't learn about the New England states talking about it around 1807 into 1808. You don't hear about it coming up again in 1812. You don't hear about it coming up again when Daniel Webster talked about what the states should do if the federal government tried to initiate military conscription, which Webster believed to be unconstitutional. You don't hear about, in 1820, the legislature of Ohio passed a resolution saying the majority of Americans believe in the principle of nullification. You don't hear about in the 1850s, the state of Wisconsin, the legislature declared the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 to be in many particulars unconstitutional, void, and of no effect, and the state Supreme Court upheld that. And on, like none of this, right? This may as well be a country on Mars. Like, this doesn't sound like the United States at all. Like, no one ever hears this stuff. But as you hear it, it makes you think, well, gosh, what else have I not heard about? What is the deal here? This is the Rosetta Stone. What I think we need to do at this point is to take this knowledge to show people, well, you know what, American history is a lot more interesting than you thought. There's a lot going on that we haven't been let in on. Why haven't we been let in on this? What is the agenda behind the normal establishment version of American history? What is the agenda? And they're not particularly subtle about it. Decentralization is stupid and backward, and the progressive way forward is for all you stupid rubes to centralize power in our hands. That's the lesson of the establishment version of American history, and that version cannot be smashed hard enough and buried deeply enough, and that's what we have to be engaged in. So, we have to influence public opinion so that people break free of these intellectual shackles that have been placed on us, placed on our minds, whereby we can't even think of any other way of living other than 309 million people being infallibly governed by one small group. That we can't even think of any other way. Anybody who thinks any other way, there's something wrong with him. He's an enemy of society. And I don't know, little by little, we got to undo that. So, I mean, one thing I've suggested, this is not the entirety of our strategy, I assure you, but start using the word nullify in casual conversation. I'll give you an example. Yeah, bartender, I'll have a Jim Beam on the rocks, please. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I think I want to nullify that order. Instead, I'll have something like that. So the word starts to roll off the tongue a little bit more. Also, this becomes our way of identifying each other across the great expanse of this country. All right, so, the Freemasons have their funny hand gestures, whatever. We got the word nullify. One of my action items for you today is, if you have not done so, I want to urge you to look at the way that I went after established opinion and the established media, pushing nullification forth. I want to urge you to go to a website called interviewwithazombie.com. This is your action item for the day, interviewwithazombie.com. I'm not going to tell you about it now. A lot of you have seen it. But that's what we can do. That sort of thing cracks through the monopoly, because when you laugh at them, they hate that. They hate that. They hate being made to look stupid. Now, I want you guys to think, as we wrap up here, I want you to think about the set of people who are likely to oppose us if we engage in nullification. I want you to imagine those people in your head. Then, separately, I want you to imagine the set of people who are responsible for reducing the American Republic to its present condition. What do you notice about those two groups? It's the same people. So their opposition to us is a medal on our chests, okay? It is not anything to be afraid of. We need, first and foremost, to be educated. I mean, when I wrote nullification, it was because I noticed that as a historian, all I do is I talk about old things. And I used to talk about nullification as a historical issue. Then I noticed that there were Tea Party groups linking to my videos on nullification saying, hey, this sounds like something pretty good we could try now. I thought, my gosh, I never thought I would live to see this. So I thought, all right, I'm going to write the book that basically makes all the arguments so that when the jerks attack these people, they can defend themselves. So we got to be we have to impress people. People have to say, all right, that guy knows what he's talking about. That law professor is obviously a stuffed shirt who's never read anything other than some establishment constitutional law textbook, which, by the way, bears zero resemblance to the actual Constitution, I assume you know. We had to be able to wipe the floor with these people in public exchanges. That doesn't mean we have to be rude, but we have to be decisive victors. And it's easy to do this. But also at the same time, we need to keep disagreements among ourselves civil and respectful, because nobody in this room is the problem right now, okay? The fact that you guys had the presence of mind to come to this thing is fantastic. And we should assume that we're all friends here and not look for reasons to say, well, my group has a 3% different view of things than your group does. All right, well, let's talk about that over coffee. Let's not rip each other's heads off over this. Let's not be like the Marxists. You know, you have 1.03% deviation and you are like the worst ever, banished forever. And if we ever get in power, you are the first ones in the gulag. We're not like that. Come on. But also we have to be determined and not easily discouraged. Keep yourselves posted on nullification efforts by going to 10thamendmentcenter.com, where they keep this stuff very much on the radar. You can follow me at tomwoods.com. I have a big announcement coming April the 9th, so I hope you'll tune in for that. But ultimately, let's forge ahead together with a courage born of camaraderie and a just cause, and fully aware of where we stand in the great flow of history as participants in the struggle of liberty against power, a struggle that began long before we were born and will persist long after we're dead. And what an honor it is for all of us to play this role in history, and how great it is for me to be joined in that task by all of you. So onward, and thank you very much.
All right, folks, that's going to do it for today. If you're waiting for publicity for your website, I will get to, I think, the ones I have left by probably the end of this week. So I've got some fresh weeks coming up. If you want to start that website, go ahead and grab your hosting through the link you'll find at tomwoods.com/publicity. And then you'll get free publicity from me, along with other valuable bonuses, including our mutual help group and some tutorials and the SEO juice you get from being linked to on my site. So those benefits are at tomwoods.com/publicity. If you enjoy what I'm doing, check out supportinglisteners.com. You get a lot of benefits and our secret group where all kinds of mischief takes place. That's over at supportinglisteners.com. I'll see you tomorrow.
Become a smarter libertarian in just 30 minutes a day. Visit tomwoods.com to subscribe to the show for free, and we'll see you next time.
Remember back a few years ago when you wanted to sell something? Where could you advertise that product? You had so many media to choose from. There were signboards and newspapers and radio and television. Which one should you pick? Well, thanks to Heartland Newsfeed, those days are over. Let us help you plan a print ad, an online ad, or a radio ad that will target your customer. And the price is based on the type of advertising you want to do, the size of the print ad, or the length of the radio spot. Or you can choose all three. And our prices are considerably more affordable than the competition. And best of all, we guarantee satisfaction. If you don't like your ad, we'll do it over for you. We want you to be satisfied with what we do, so you'll let us plan your advertising over and over. So, call Heartland Newsfeed today at 1-866-285-4117. That's 1-866-285-4117. It's a new type of advertising for a brand new century.
In an emergency, radio can be your lifeline. When the power is out and cellular networks are down, Next Radio is the free FM radio app that still works on your Android smartphone. Download Next Radio now at the Google Play Store. Stay tuned to this station and stay safe.
From Keene, the Shire, the Liberty Media capital of the world, this is Daryl W. Perry, host of FPP Radio News for Friday, August 24th, 2018. Silver is trading at $14.67 per ounce. Gold is valued at $1,193 per ounce. Zencash is trading at $20, and the average price of Bitcoin is $6,524. Antiwar.com reports a day after both the Afghan government and U.S. government declined offers to attend, the Taliban has announced they have accepted Russia's invitation to a multinational peace talks to be held next month in Moscow. The Taliban issued a statement saying it is their intention to send a delegation led by the head of their political office, which is based in Qatar. The U.S. recently held talks with Taliban from that office. The Taliban's acceptance is a significant boost for the talks. Russia has reported inviting 12 nations to the talks, though as yet, we don't know which will be attending. Having the Taliban there will give the talks at least some meaning and credibility. The Afghan government has said that they want talks to be one-on-one with the Taliban and no external countries involved. The Taliban, by contrast, has said they believe they need assurances from other countries, particularly the United States, and don't think talks with the Afghan government by itself would be particularly meaningful. Zencash is now Horizon. Horizon is a privacy platform built on zero-knowledge technology with a decentralized secure node architecture. The Horizon platform enables real-life uses beyond currency, including the ability to privately chat with other people. Soon, Horizon will enable you to publish information and go anywhere on the web, all with complete privacy. Horizon, bringing privacy to life. Learn more at horizon.global. HORIZEN.global. UPI reports as California firefighters battled the largest fires in state's history, Verizon slowed wireless data speeds to a crawl, making it almost impossible for emergency personnel to use some of its high-tech tracking equipment. Santa Clara County Fire Chief Anthony Bowden said emergency personnel heavily rely on internet services to monitor fast-moving fires and coordinate resources. The fire department has an unlimited government plan with Verizon, but the company slowed or throttled data speeds once the agency reached a certain threshold, according to Bowden in an August 20th court filing. Bowden said the internet has become an essential tool in providing fire and emergency response, particularly for events like large fires, which require the rapid deployment and organization of thousands of personnel and hundreds of fire engines, aircraft, and bulldozers. Keeping emergency personnel connected requires a lot of data. While battling the Mendocino Complex fire, Bowden said his department's mobile communications center sent and received 5 to 10 gigabytes of data through a wireless router daily. During that time, Verizon reduced speeds that slowed service of the equipment to dial-up speeds. Santa Clara County Fire Captain Bill Murphy told CNN simple tasks like sending an email or updating a Google document were almost impossible. You can support FPP Radio by joining the Fans program. Fans are friends, allies, and numerous supporters. Fans help FPP afford to produce more original content. You can join the Fans program for as little as $1 per month through Patreon and get perks like ad-free versions of FPP Radio News and Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com. Reuters reports a federal judge sentenced former U.S. intelligence contractor Reality Winner on Thursday to more than 5 years in prison after she admitted leaking a top-secret report on Russian interference in U.S. elections to a media outlet. Winner, who has spent already nearly 2 years in jail, pled guilty in June to passing the National Security Agency report to The Intercept in 2016. One of her attorneys, Titus Nichols, said Winner is receiving credit for the time she spent in pretrial confinement. During a hearing in Winner's hometown of Augusta, Georgia, Judge James Hall approved her lawyer's request for a 63-month sentence, followed by 3 years of supervised release, according to Nichols. It was one of the longest sentences ever given to someone for illegally disclosing government information, according to Nichols. Winner's attorneys said in a statement the sentence and accompanying plea agreement both reflect that Reality recognizes that actions have consequences and that she has learned from her mistakes and is prepared to accept the consequences of her actions. Winner admitted to intentionally printing a copy of the intelligence report in her office and mailing it to the news outlet. She was indicted on a single federal count of willful retention and transmission of national defense information, a felony under the Espionage and Censorship Act that carries a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison. Betsy Reed, editor-in-chief of The Intercept, said in a statement that Winner should be honored and that her sentencing and other prosecutions of whistleblowers were attacks on freedom of speech and of the press. This has been FPP Radio News, online at fppradio.com.
There are a ton of social networking websites, but one stands apart for a very special reason. This one saves lives. It's MatchingDonors.com. MatchingDonors.com links organ donors with people in need of kidney and other transplants. In the U.S., 19 people die each day waiting for an organ transplant, most of them for kidneys. If you've ever considered becoming a living organ donor, or if you have someone in need of an organ transplant, visit MatchingDonors.com. Home of the greatest gift of all, the gift of life. MatchingDonors.com.
Do you need dental insurance? Then call Physicians Mutual Insurance Company for details. Not just a discount plan, real coverage for 350 procedures. Call 1-855-402-7556. Again, that's 1-855-402-7556. Offer is not available in Minnesota, Montana, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Rhode Island, Vermont, and Washington.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. A dispute has ended in Georgia over polling access in a rural county. Officials had considered closing most of the polling stations in the majority black county. Georgia Public Broadcasting's Grant Blankenship reports voting rights activists say they'll remain vigilant.
The decision by the Randolph County Board of Elections not to close 7 of 9 polling places took less than a minute and was followed by cheers. The plan had been the idea of a consultant who in turn said it was approved by Georgia's Secretary of State, Brian Kemp. He oversees elections here and is a Republican running for governor. That's why Edward DuBose, national board member of the NAACP, says Randolph County is just an example of a far larger problem.
This is a victory, but by no means should anyone relax. And not only do we need to watch Randolph County, but every county in the South.
Even before the controversy, there were calls for Brian Kemp to step down from his post as Secretary of State. He faces Democrat Stacey Abrams in November. For NPR News, I'm Grant Blankenship in Cuthbert, Georgia.
In Hawaii, Hurricane Lane continues to cause flash flooding and dangerous surf as it lingers off the state's southern coast. Though it's been downgraded to a Category 3 storm, officials say it remains a major threat. As NPR's Adrian Florido reports, the storm is now approaching the state's most populous island, Oahu.
Winds in the capital, Honolulu, began picking up Thursday evening, and in residential and tourist areas alike, people made long lines at markets and grocery stores as they prepared to hunker down. Honolulu's mayor activated the emergency sirens that are scattered across Oahu Island. They blared as a final warning to find shelter. Though Lane is weakening and expected to turn away from Hawaii on Saturday, officials say nothing is certain and conditions could still take a turn for the worse. Even as it approaches Oahu, the storm continues dumping heavy rain on Hawaii's Big Island and on Maui, and officials said they'd already undertaken at least one rescue mission. Adrian Florido, NPR News, Honolulu.
2 immigrants' rights organizations have filed a complaint against the Department of Homeland Security. They allege some migrants who were separated from their children unknowingly gave up their rights after federal agents used coercive measures to get them to sign deportation orders. Natalie Krebs has more.
Attorneys say that some parents claim that federal agents presented them with deportation forms that were already filled out. Those immigrants say they were not able to ask questions about the paperwork and faced backlash from federal agents if they refused to sign. Additionally, the complaint says the forms were only in English, which some immigrants could not read.
Natalie Krebs reporting. On Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 115 points at 25,772. The Nasdaq is up nearly 60 points at 7,938. You're listening to NPR. Zimbabwe's constitutional court has confirmed the election of Emerson Mnangagwa as the country's president. The election on July 30th has been disputed by the opposition, which challenged irregularities in the ballot counting. The Zimbabwean army also cracked down on opposition supporters right after the election, and at least 6 people were killed. Pakistan is accusing the U.S. State Department of what it calls a factually incorrect account of a phone call between Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Pakistan's new Prime Minister Imran Khan. NPR's Dia Hadid reports from Islamabad. Pakistan wants a correction.
It's only been 4 days since Pakistan's new government was sworn in, and the country's already strained relations with Washington have taken another dive. The Foreign Ministry spokesman Mohammad Faisal tweeted that Pakistan took exception to the State Department readout because it said Pompeo raised the importance of Pakistan taking decisive action against terrorists operating in the country. Faisal said that was not raised in the conversation. Pakistan denies it harbours militants on its soil. The spokeswoman for the State Department said they stood by their readout. Pakistan has not issued its own readout of the call. Dia Hadid, NPR News, Islamabad.
The Italian government says the Mount Etna volcano in Sicily is spewing lava and sending up ash and smoke. Italy's National Institutes of Geophysics and Volcanology says it has observed a small lava flow on the southern side of the volcanic cone. There are no reports of evacuations or threats to residents. I'm Corva Coleman, NPR News in Washington.
Support for this NPR podcast and the following message come from Delta Airlines, offering Delta Comfort Plus, including Sky Priority boarding and dedicated overhead bin space. Delta aims to make your travel experience as easy and comfortable as possible, so you arrive refreshed and ready to take on the world.
The game doesn't stop.
Neither should you.
Wherever you go, the game goes too using the enabled FM chip in your phone and the Next Radio app.
The Next Radio app brings real FM radio to your phone.
Just plug in your headphones and listen to the Next Radio app, and you'll save major data and battery life compared to streaming apps. And there are no blackouts, so you never miss the games you love played on your local FM radio station. Download the Next Radio app to enhance your radio listening experience. And keep going. With no blackouts and restrictions, the game follows you. Your favorite team, host, and commentator go with you.
The best thing is, it's all totally free. No subscriptions, no fees. Get off the sidelines and download the Next Radio app today, free.
Next Radio, live and local, wherever you go.
Do you or a loved one have a chronic condition such as diabetes, a heart condition, or asthma? Do you or a loved one have a severe allergy to a certain food, drug, or insect? If you answer yes to any of these questions, you are a candidate for an electronic medical alert watch, the alternative to the traditional medical ID bracelet. An electronic medical alert watch visibly communicates a person's health conditions, drug, food, and other allergies, and other critical information to help make a diagnosis and save a life. Take control of your health. Protect yourself or your loved ones and order an electronic medical alert watch today. Visit www.epill.com. That's epill.com. Affordable, free shipping, and a 30-day money-back guarantee. Remember, www.epill.com. That's EPILL.com. ePill.
The Tom Woods Show, episode 1217.
Prepare to set fire to the index card of allowable opinion. Your daily dose of liberty education starts here. The Tom Woods Show.
Homeschooling parents, it's going to be time to start thinking about next year before you know it. Let me recommend to you the self-taught Ron Paul curriculum, which I've been using with my daughters. It's going to preserve your mental health while it gives them a top-notch education. Plus, get $160 worth of free bonuses when you use my link, ronpaulhomeschool.com. Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. We're talking today about the way the state's method for teaching math just sucks all the life out of it, just ruins it. But instead of just complaining about it, we're going to talk about an alternative, a really exciting alternative created in the private sector. Where else? So that is coming up in just a minute. I want to remind you, make sure, especially if you're looking for more content, I want you to check out my friends at Free Talk Live. These are great folks. They have a nationally syndicated radio program on 150 plus stations. They're ranked the number 29 talk show in the nation. You can listen to them as a podcast by going to listen.freetalklive.com. It's a call-in show, current events, all kinds of stuff. Great commentary, a lot of fun, 3 hours a day, 7 days a week. So check them out at listen.freetalklive.com. Now today, my guest is J.W. Weatherman. He's a software security expert who's been in the Silicon Valley startup scene for 20 years. And we're talking to him today about his current project, mathbot.com. And you can use it to learn math. And you learn math by programming a robot. And it's fun and exciting, and I've actually just started doing it just to have a sense of it before the conversation. And I know it will be used in the Woods household without a doubt. It's a great example of a gap left by the so-called public sector that's filled by the private. And it's really great, again, because I feel like sometimes it's just so much doom and gloom, and that's not really what fundamentally I'm about, but yet by default it seems like a lot of the content winds up being that way. So when we have somebody who's creating something rather than just complaining, I'm really happy to talk to that person. So J.W. Weatherman, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's talk about, I do want to talk about your MathBot, but I guess we want to maybe set the stage for why it's necessary for the private sector to do these sorts of things. I think the natural order of things that the private sector should do them, but we're, of course, assured all the time that, don't worry, the government's got this all well in hand. Just send us your kids and we'll make sure the information is deposited in their brains. Somehow that doesn't seem to be working out. And so the real innovations, what's really exciting in education, is all happening in the private sector. So let's start with the so-called public sector and the way science and math is being taught there. A lot of people will complain about Common Core, but I bet even before Common Core, I think it just goes well beyond that. So what are your thoughts on this, and how did you get interested in this area?
Yeah, well, I've been a software security expert for about 20 years, and for the last decade or so doing startups out of Silicon Valley. But I was also a professor at a university earlier in my career, and I've been an executive. So the need to get a hold of good talent has always been a forefront in my mind, and education is the way to do that, especially, there's a constant need for new software developers. We're going through a technology revolution like the Industrial Revolution, and there's just not enough mechanics. So if you're at all related to software, you're constantly trying to figure out ways to solve this problem. And the way that it really hit me was I had sold the company and went out to dinner with my wife. It was actually our anniversary dinner, and it was good timing because as an entrepreneur, you have downtime between sort of starting a new venture, building it up, and the normal life cycle for a startup is you sell it to a larger company, and then you have a couple of years of downtime. So this was about 2 years ago, and I was having dinner with my wife, who also she doesn't go through as big of the swings as I do, but after I've sold the company, she has more downtime in the sense that I'm less stressed out and things are a little bit of a lull. So she was tutoring some kids in the neighborhood, and one of the kids, their parents, they were basically on the verge of doing medication. They couldn't figure out how to help this kid do better in math. So we're at our anniversary dinner, and she starts explaining to me this new math, this Common Core stuff that has been pushed out, nationwide with no pilot, no testing, nothing. And our whole anniversary dinner was just me on the edge of throwing up with rage. Because what they've done, I guess to put it in context, so for about 2,000 years, from Alexander the Great all the way through Einstein, everybody learned math using a standard textbook called Euclid's Elements, and it probably evolved over the centuries and millennia. But it's really a lovely way to learn math. And it helps you, if you look at it, it'll help you understand why Einstein was able to do thought experiments and explore the nature of the universe just by sitting back in the patent office. Because math is all about problem solving and exploring the relationship of logical concepts with each other. But you and I, as older guys, but not as old as Einstein, we went through a version of math that was really a statist version of math that was all about following a procedure. So you you accidentally solve a problem. You don't actually get to do any real problem solving in the sense that everybody before us got. Common Core has taken that to a whole new level where not only is it strictly about following the procedure, but you might have to follow 3 or 4 different procedures to get the answer. And it's completely incidental whether you get the correct answer or not. The absolute focus is on the process and basically the paperwork. So what the public schools have done, and I don't know if this is just the invisible hand of corruption. That's what I tend to think that it is, just over the decades, people trying to maximize their own benefits, right, in a monopoly system. But honestly, if you were to try to design something to just crush the love of learning and make math as odious an experience as possible, I actually have a list of bullet points that I put together of the ways that I would go about making the most evil system of teaching math possible. And I am not exaggerating when I say Common Core checks every single box. It is brilliant in its evil.
Wow. I'd actually like to see that checklist. I'm curious because it sounds diabolical.
Diabolical is exactly the word. So let me just give you a couple because it's always top of mind. So one of the things that you would do. So the human mind is set up to enjoy problem solving. Math is logical exploration and problem solving. So if you wanted to do it in a really evil way, you'd have to find a way around the chemical reward that kids get and adults for solving a problem, because we kind of get addicted to doing good in that sense, right? You make the world slightly better, your brain rewards you with dopamine, and you want to do it again. So if you sit back and think, how would you do that? It's actually a really hard problem. How do you teach kids how to problem solve without letting them be rewarded for that? And the answer is you just don't let them problem solve, right? What you do instead is you create something, you overload the word math. So when I say math, and when Einstein would have said math, he thinks of problem solving and using tricks like carry the one as sort of a side effect to problem solving, right? These are handy shortcuts to being able to add a number multiple times over again. But what they've done is they've used the word math to literally mean just following a process and a procedure. And you know that they've done that because kids don't ever, when they get to the right answer after following this procedure, have that moment of, that's it. If you never have that aha moment, then you're not problem solving, then you're not actually doing math. So, if that's not diabolical, I don't know what would be worse. One more quick example is if you were introducing kids to numbers and counting, it would be really important to focus on a single number system. So we use a 10-base number system. We go up to 9, and then we move to 2 digits. Software or computers use a 2-base number system. So you just go up to 1, and then you have to use another digit. One way to really make it difficult to start thinking in numbers would be to introduce as many different number systems as early on as possible. And the more illogical, the better. Illogical might not be the best word, but the more confusing, the better. So what we do to kids now is we introduce them to, and we actually have them focus a surprising number of hours on the 2 worst areas that we have in human life at this point for a real logical number system, and that is clocks and the imperial system. So with normal numbers, it's always 10-based, right? And you have decimals, and those are parts of 10. You have a comma that represents, now you've moved over to another chunk of 10 to 1,000. It's very logical in its structure. But if you look at something like a clock, it goes up to 12. Well, that's weird. And then it starts over and goes to 12 again. And then there's this other layer where it's AM and PM. Now, we're all comfortable with that because we've dealt with it. But imagine learning to go up to 10, to go up to 9 and then stop. And then you're also learning to go up to 12 and then restart. And you're learning AM and PM. And the imperial system is like that on steroids, where, you go from inches, which are, you just work in fractions exclusively, right? Sub-inch. And then above that, you have a 12-base system. Above that, you're looking at how many feet are in a mile. That's a 5,000 in some base system. And then you can also go to yards. It's just not, it's not a good way to start thinking about numbers when you're having to learn multiple number systems at the same time. So they do that to a really surprising degree. And those are just a couple of the things that I would avoid if I was trying to teach math well. And I would definitely want to emphasize as much as possible if I was trying to make it just a miserable process.
Right. Yeah, I mean, once you get to a point where, I mean, let me say this. Let's be honest. Some people, no matter how you teach math to them, are just not going to like it, and they're not going to take to it, and it's just not their thing, and that's fine. In the same way that there are a lot of topics you might teach me that I'm not going to care for. I happen to love math. I think math is elegant and beautiful and wonderful. But I got to a point where I was the captain of the math team, and I was doing really interesting math where it was like puzzle solving. The problems that I had to solve were not the kind of problems I could flip a book open to, find an example that's identical, and just by rote repeat the steps. I had to think about it the way you would think about a brain teaser. And that's why I enjoyed it, because it was fun and it was challenging. In fact, I remember one of my classmates saying to me, as nicely as he could, "Do you actually enjoy being on the math team? Like, he couldn't quite get where I was getting satisfaction from." And I said, well, I think maybe it's that you enjoy things that you feel like you're good at. And I do think it was partly that, but I just took a real pleasure in solving puzzles. I like to solve puzzles. And in a way, it's kind of like one of the things I enjoy about libertarianism, that a lot of times you are involved in solving puzzles. How would society solve X problem without coercion? Go. Well, that's a puzzle in a way. How is that possible? How could we make that happen? And you use your knowledge of economics and other disciplines to try to hammer out an answer. So anyway, that's just my own observation, that the joy that I found in math was that I was doing a lot of math that wasn't just, here are some steps, here are 87 problems to apply those steps to, now go do them and then hang yourself. It wasn't that at all.
Right. Yeah, I would push back on that a little bit and say that everybody enjoys math. So I think what happened with you is you were probably good enough at the procedures to where it wasn't super painful for you to do it. So you just cranked out the stuff. Like when they gave you a worksheet that said, multiply 2 times 10, multiply 5 times 10, multiply 4 times 10. You probably just said, all right, I'll add a 0 on these. You cranked it out and you moved on, and it didn't really affect you. But there's other kids that, and a lot of times this is actually related to intelligence, that just cannot stand that would literally rather stab themselves with a pencil than actually do that. Once they see the pattern, it's very hard for them to continue to fill out that form. And I think those are the guys that, at least in my experience as I've been helping more and more kids with math over the years, those are the kids that get diagnosed with learning disabilities. Those are the kids that end up getting medicated. And it's not because they're dumb. It's actually because they're just sort of strong-willed. And in a way, they're too smart to put up with this nonsense. They won't put themselves through this mental anguish. And, it varies of how much mental anguish there is, right? So it's not strictly intelligence. Obviously, you were a super smart kid. But that tends to be the thing that I see more than they're just dumb. And it makes sense if you think about it. I mean, if you look at something like Euclid's Elements, the very first problem is he gives you a line and he says you can draw 2 circles and you can draw a straight line and you can't do anything else. And you need to think about how you can take this line and you can cut it in half. You can bisect it. Well, that's kind of an interesting puzzle. And if you have a teacher there that gives you hints along the way, there's nobody that would hate that, right? I'm sure there's exceptions, but in general, if you have a normally functioning human mind, you're going to enjoy something like that because we're basically hardwired to do that. So I think that we have a tendency to think that people don't enjoy math, but really what they don't enjoy is the process and the procedure and the chaos, frankly, that's introduced into their mind as they're trying to explore logic and reason. So that was really the inspiration to start MathBot. Is I believe that everybody enjoys math. I believe if it's taught well, everybody will enjoy math and programming, which are really synonymous, incidentally. It's programming if you were to use a word like add, and it's math if you use a symbol like the plus symbol. But other than that, it's an identical activity. So I believe that everybody enjoys programming. I've yet to meet anybody that doesn't enjoy programming and doesn't enjoy math. So the question then is, how do we go about, destroying this evil system? How do we go about, as ANCAPs and, for myself as a technology person, how do you address the problem? And for me, it was obvious. I didn't want to try to do politics, right? I didn't want to start spending my money on lobbying or anything like that. I really want to build an application, make it free. And if everything goes well, maybe we've got a 1 or 3% chance of this all lining up, but those odds are okay, because if it all works out, I will have the pleasure of putting thousands, maybe millions of public school teachers out of work. And I can't think of anything that would be more satisfying than that at this point.
So talk to me about mathbot.com and how that is, I mean, it's a great thing in and of itself, but it's also, kind of a shot between the eyes to this traditional way of getting people into math and, and related fields.
Yeah. It's very much a politically motivated project. If you go out to mathbot.com, you're not going to see that, right? It's just, hey, learn math by programming a robot, log in. You've basically got pictures that represent your functions. So it's very easy to get started. You don't even need to know how to read in order to play MathBot and start programming. Within about 50 levels. So I would say if you're 5 years old, you're probably going to tap out maybe around level 20 or so, but that's fine because you just wait until your brain develops a little bit more and then you can get to level 30. But I'd say if you're, let's say 8, 9 years old, you can get all the way through the first 50 levels. And at the end of those 50 levels, you haven't done anything that's hard because, again, math is very logical and systematic and incremental. It's really just layers of abstraction, and each layer should be a very small step. So after those 50 very small steps, you're already programming recursive functions and you're programming with conditionals. So you're actually writing code within those first 50 levels. And I've seen more than a few. We've got a few thousand people playing the game at this point. More than a few kids around that age actually have no problem getting to programming recursive functions. And that's actually something professional programmers will pause and have to think through. So the potential that's there, I think, is really incredible inside every one of these little guys' heads. And again, it's not just for little kids. If you're thinking about a career change, I definitely would encourage you to think about software. This is a great place to do it as well. So you won't see that there's like a political motivation, let's call it, although I hate to use that word, but just by playing the game. But it really is an attempt to just make it really obvious, frankly, that public schools never taught math. They always taught how to fill out paperwork. And when kids learn math for free online, Khan Academy at one point had the potential to do this, but they sort of got absorbed by Common Core. If kids are learning how to do this for free online, it's just going to make it really obvious that public schools are not needed for that crown jewel of math. And then I think I'm hoping that it starts a flood where other people go after things like language arts, and we can just completely make it obvious that public schools never taught this stuff well. In many cases, they tried to indoctrinate and inoculate people to these subjects. And I think math is a perfect example of that. And that they were really always just a low quality daycare. So that's really the goal. I think we're doing pretty well so far. It's pretty exciting.
So where are you now? I know that mathbot.com is up because I just went there myself and started doing it, but is it a work in progress? Is it all done? Do you have further ambitions for it? What's it going to look like ultimately?
Yeah, so we've got levels that are internally available to all the team that go all the way through calculus. So we've got a really, really solid roadmap. Right now, we go all the way through programming, which is actually, we start with programming because what we wanted to do is we wanted to give kids the power to move the robot around and control the environment, move blocks, do addition problems right off the bat, because that allows us to completely eliminate all of the redundant rote processes, right? If you can write a function that solves an exponents problem, you don't have to sit down and solve 400 exponents problems. Like, you've got it. You actually taught somebody else, in a sense. You taught the robot how to solve the exponents problem. So we start with programming and we go through calculus. Right now, we've got all of the programming levels released. So within, I would say, the next couple of weeks, we'll have addition and then subtraction, because again, we've got it all internally. But what we're trying to do is not push it out until it's super, super polished and a really, really clean experience. So I would say that any kids that jump on it right now will probably be able to stay ahead of them, at least through division. After that, we have some features that we need to add for, really it's kind of design problems. Like, how do we visualize putting an object in orbit around a planet? How do you calculate that? We've more or less got that, but we've got some work to do there. So I would say if a kid started now, we've got them covered up through exponents, which is through 8th grade, right? It's kind of incredible how little math gets accomplished from kindergarten through 8th grade. But it's basically counting, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, exponents. Those 6 topics are the core of what's accomplished in more than that number of years. It's really insane. So yeah, if you sign up now as a kid, I think we've got you covered. And probably by the time you get done with exponents, we'll have calculus up as well.
You are more associated with Bitcoin in the public eye than anything else. Is there any connection between cryptocurrency and this project?
Yeah, actually, So I would say maybe 6 months ago, I decided, I guess I'm kind of bad with timelines. I guess I started working on MathBot about 3 years ago. And about a year ago, I decided that I was going to shelf it for a little bit because I couldn't figure out how to get past this problem. We built the first version, which is the one that's only available internally, and we did a bunch of testing. And what we found out after putting about 200 or 300 kids through it is that and it should have been obvious in hindsight, right? Like almost everything. But what we found out is that kids that had parents that were providing external incentives, right? Like, oh, if little Billy passes the first 50 levels, I'll buy him an ice cream. Those kids just thrived and they just burned through it. And then the majority of the kids that didn't have any parents' involvement, parents weren't around, there wasn't any external incentives, they really kind of floundered. And some of them did it anyway, but they're the exception, right? So they're the kids that are going to thrive even in public schools. And since the goal was to do something really broad and, fully replace the need for public schools to be involved or pretend to be involved in math education, I was a little bit stumped of how I could scale that and address those kids that don't have parents that are really involved at that level. And then about a year ago, I got obsessed with Bitcoin. I'm a software security expert, but I really hadn't looked into Bitcoin. I was very skeptical that it had value. I knew that on an economic front, that if it worked, it would be amazing, just from being obsessed with Mises and Rothbard and Austrian economics. But as a software security guy, you become very jaded over fairly early in your career. So I thought it was garbage. But a year ago, I looked into it. I threat modeled it and concluded that I couldn't find a way to break it. And then a few months later, I realized, wait a minute, if I could actually have parents or grandparents maybe pay $50 for algebra and then give kids $2 or $3 worth of Bitcoin every time they passed an algebra level, that might be a way for me to scale up the incentives and really go much broader. So that kind of breathed new life into the project. And yeah, I would say right now I'm probably 80% obsessed with MathBot and 20% obsessed with Bitcoin.
All right, very good. Now, you said earlier something about you're continuing to work on it and so on and so forth, but people should just go and sign up immediately and just start using it because, as you say, there's plenty of stuff to keep them busy as you're putting the final touches.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say that if you want your kids to learn math and programming, there's no better place, there's no better resource that I know of. And obviously, I may be a little bit biased, but frankly, I started working on this problem not because I wanted to be, a founder of yet another startup, but because I really, really see a huge need. And so as of right now, I really couldn't in good conscience recommend anything else other than mathbot.com for you to get started with math and programming. Sure that, we're still in development. And so if you're using a browser that's not, you're using Safari instead of Chrome, maybe you'll see bugs that we haven't seen yet. But if you do, that's great. You can hit me up on Twitter at WeathermanIM actually with any issues that you see, and we'll get them fixed. So you'll actually be contributing to the project in that sense as well. But really, if you fire up mathbot.com right now on whatever device you're on and you start playing the game, you'll see that it's a really high quality project. It's not like a lot of the altruistic sort of efforts that are out there that are really low grade. This has been really well funded with absolutely the top talent. And I think you'll feel that as soon as you get out to the website and start experiencing it. So that's absolutely where I would start. And if anybody does get excited about what we're doing and wants to contribute, there's a lot of opportunity there, but there's really no better place to go that I know of than mathbot.com right now.
Absolutely great. All right. Well, I'm going to link at tomwoods.com/1217 to mathbot.com as well as your Twitter. So as you say, people can reach out to you. And I would like people to check this out. I can say as a borderline guarantee that before today is out, my 8-year-old will be on this site doing stuff. So it's going to be, and I have kids of other ages who could also benefit from it, but she in particular will just go nuts for this. So I'm really happy that I found out about this, and thank goodness somebody wrote to me and said, Woods, you blockhead. Not quite that way. There's a great project out there that you should know about, because, there's so much doom and gloom in the world, and sometimes this show reflects that. And it's great to see there are people out there lighting that proverbial candle in the darkness, actually doing something instead of just griping all day. That's how we win, is by actually doing something. You don't like what's going on? Then create a replacement. And that's what you've done here. So congratulations. Mathbot.com is where people should go, and continued good luck with it.
Thanks a lot, Tom. It was really amazing to be able to come on the show and talk to you today.
All right, folks, as we depart, I want to tell you about a website called markuptrading.com. Got to do your due diligence with stuff like this, of course, but it's based on the Wyckoff method. Richard D. Wyckoff set out to teach retail traders the real rules of the game when it comes to trading and investing in the markets. So markuptrading.com is dedicated to education and mastery of the Wyckoff method. The site features analysis of current markets and individual issues, focused on achieving a higher understanding of the theory and techniques of the Wyckoff method. And you learn all about Richard D. Wyckoff through all kinds of resources online. But check out markuptrading.com, created by a Tom Woods Show listener. We'll link to it at tomwoods.com/1217. Get your free publicity by going to tomwoods.com/publicity and getting your web hosting through my link before you start your site, and then you get wonderful publicity and a rush of traffic from me. All right, that's it for today, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.
Become a smarter libertarian in just 30 minutes a day. Visit tomwoods.com to subscribe to the show for free, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, Steve Harvey here for the Illinois Broadcasters Association, and in a recent survey, the Illinois Emergency Management Agency was asked to name the top 5 items that every Illinois family needs to have in their home's emergency disaster kit. Check out these answers. Water, can't live without it. Number 2, non-perishable food. Well, after all, a man gotta eat, right? Number 3, weather radio, and make sure you got fresh batteries too. Number 4, flashlight. Even more reason to have fresh batteries on hand. Number 5, first aid kit. Look, there's no reason to feud over what items to put in your family's emergency disaster kit. Get the answers and more at ready.illinois.gov. That's ready.illinois.gov.
Sponsored by the Illinois Emergency Management Agency, aired in cooperation with the Illinois Broadcasters Association and this station.
BBC News with Sue Montgomery. Spain's cabinet has passed a decree authorising the removal of the remains of the fascist dictator, General Francisco Franco, from a monument to those who died in the country's civil war. The general was laid to rest in the Basilica at the Valley of the Fallen after his death in 1975. The Deputy Prime Minister, Carmen Calvo, explained the decision.
Del lugar donde están las víctimas de la contienda.
To have the victims of the disappeared in the same place as where Franco is held is completely unacceptable for a democracy like ours. A tomb of state and a public place for heritage are completely incompatible, and it lacks respect for the victims. 130 parliamentarians from Southeast Asia have urged the UN Security Council to take Myanmar to the International Criminal Court over its treatment of the Rohingyas. The call comes a year after the Myanmar security forces drove more than 700,000 Rohingyas into Bangladesh in what the UN called textbook ethnic cleansing. The Republican senator and former U.S. presidential candidate John McCain has decided not to continue his treatment for aggressive brain cancer. Senator McCain, who's represented Arizona since 1987, first revealed that he was seriously ill a year ago. The military veteran, who spent years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam, will be 82 next week. Chris Buckler reports from Washington.
For more than 3 decades, John McCain has been a significant voice in Congress. He may at one time have been a Republican presidential candidate, but he's never been afraid to speak out against the party, and he's been a harsh critic of Donald Trump, even during his illness. Last year, Mr. McCain was diagnosed with glioblastoma, an aggressive form of brain cancer. In a statement, his family said, with his usual strength of will, he had chosen to stop receiving medical treatment. And they thanked the thousands of people who they said were keeping him in their prayers.
The Constitutional Court of Zimbabwe has upheld the election victory of President Emmerson Mnangagwa, paving the way for his inauguration. It dismissed an appeal by the opposition leader Nelson Chamisa, who'd alleged there was widespread rigging in last month's vote. Shinga Nyoka is in Harare.
The uncertainty that has hung over this nation for weeks has finally been resolved in the Constitutional Court. The majority of judges ruled that the main opposition's Nelson Chamisa had not provided adequate proof or evidence of ghost voting and inflated numbers in favor of his rival, Emmerson Mnangagwa. Mr. Mnangagwa is now expected to be inaugurated within 48 hours. And while he's received legitimacy from the courts, he still faces an uphill task of uniting a deeply divided nation.
World News from the BBC. World Football's governing body FIFA has given the head of the Palestinian Football Association a year-long suspension from matches after he called for protests targeting the Argentine star Lionel Messi. Jibril Rajoub had urged football fans to burn shirts and pictures of Messi ahead of a planned game between Argentina and Israel in Jerusalem. South Africa's former Deputy Finance Minister, Mcebisi Jonas, has alleged that a member of the influential Gupta family threatened to kill him. He said the threat came after AJ Gupta offered him more than $40 million to take the position of Finance Minister and advance the Gupta's business interests. Here's the BBC's Pumsa Filani.
It's the most explosive revelation yet in the long-awaited inquiry which began in South Africa's main city, Johannesburg, earlier this week. The alleged threat came after a meeting where the businessman offered Mr. Jonas a bribe to take up the post of finance minister, and he refused. He testified that Mr. Zuma's son, Duduzane, who was a business partner of the Guptas at the time, had also been present at the meeting. The former president, his son Duduzane, and the Guptas have denied any wrongdoing.
Australia's new Prime Minister Scott Morrison has said he'll work to reunite the country and its governing Liberal Party. He was sworn in hours after his predecessor, Malcolm Turnbull, was forced out of office. He's the country's sixth Prime Minister in less than 10 years. Mr. Turnbull has said he'll resign from Parliament. The United States says it's deeply concerned about the treatment of journalists in China. The statement comes after the American BuzzFeed reporter Megha Rajagopalan found she was unable to renew her journalist visa to China. She has previously reported extensively on Beijing's security crackdown in the region of Xinjiang. BBC News.
Today we decided to walk to school. The light counted. 15, 14,
41, 31, 13.
We took a left on Carroll Street. Danny's smart, but he gets distracted.
I
realized he forgot his homework. I hope he doesn't have another bad day at school.
When you can see learning and attention issues from their side, you can be on their side. That's why there's Understood.org, a free resource for the parents of the 1 in 5 kids with learning and attention issues. Go from misunderstanding to Understood.org. Brought to you by Understood and the Ad Council.
Heartland Newsfeed is looking for an advertising sales manager to sell advertising for the website. For more information, contact Jake Leonard at admin@heartlandnewsfeed.com.
The Samsung Galaxy Note 9 is the most powerful Note ever, and it's available now, which means you can start streaming, downloading, and posting faster than ever with a crazy fast network connection. Get the Galaxy Note 9 now at Samsung.com.
Okay, let's see how many stories we can cover. The AJC this morning. Women are paying more than men for deodorant. Oh, and perfume for you men out there who buy perfume. Let's get some Democrats elected so we can set up a federal office of price gender equality. Chucky Schumer wants to delay the Senate vote on Judge Brett Kavanaugh because Michael Cohen has pled guilty. Any reason would be good enough for Chucky Schumer. A lump in his grits would do it. I hate lumps in my grits. Visa and MasterCard are cutting off payments to conservative organizations. Why? Well, all it takes is that Southern Poverty Law Center in Alabama to label you a hate group. Censorship of any conservative thought really gaining steam. Following the murder of Molly Tibbetts in Iowa, people are saying, hey, don't blame all illegal immigrants for the crimes of just one. I like the person who responded, well, hey, don't blame everybody in the NRA for the crimes of somebody who wasn't even a member. Viewers to CNN have dropped about 23 to 25% just over the last year. I cannot imagine why. Obama was in South Africa in July, and he praised the South African leader for inspiring great hope and leadership. This week, this South African leader started seizing white-owned farms with no compensation. Article, New York Times, How Can I Cure My White Guilt? I'm sure you all want to read that one. And let's end with some good news. In Sweden, the rape capital of Europe, the Alternative for Sweden party wants to send back all migrants, that means Muslims, who refuse to work. Glimmer of hope. Solomon Brothers Studios, Naples. Have a great weekend. This is Neil Bortz.
The Samsung Galaxy Note 9 is the most powerful Note ever. And it's available now, which means you can start streaming, downloading, and posting faster than ever with a crazy fast network connection. Get the Galaxy Note 9 now at Samsung.com.
Welcome to the Newsworthy. All the day's news in less than 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. Today, what to know about the investigation surrounding the president and Hurricane Lane. Plus, artificial intelligence and Oprah's new line of frozen pizza. Those stories and many more in less than 10 minutes. I'm Erica Mandy. Today is Friday, August 24th. You ready? Let's do this. The U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions fired back against the president. President Trump has been criticizing the Attorney General for a while now. He doesn't like that Sessions recused himself from the Russia investigation. And this week, in an interview with Fox News, President Trump said Sessions, quote, never took control of the Justice Department. Remember, Trump is not happy that his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, got a plea deal. Cohen pleaded guilty and said Trump told him to make illegal payments. Well, the president says Cohen's claims are not true, and he criticized Sessions in the process. Well, the AG has stayed pretty quiet for a while, but not this week. He put out a statement saying, quote, while I am Attorney General, the actions of the Department of Justice will not be improperly influenced by political considerations. A top Republican now says he won't be surprised if President Trump finds a new Attorney General after the midterm elections. To be continued. Speaking of the case against Michael Cohen, the Wall Street Journal says someone else got a deal to cooperate with prosecutors. The CEO of the company that publishes the National Enquirer. The report says federal prosecutors gave David Pecker immunity, or let him off the hook legally if he'll share some secrets, because the tabloid reportedly agreed to pay for stories of women who have alleged affairs with Trump, and then bury those stories, never publish them. Pecker is a longtime friend of President Trump, and now sources tell the Wall Street Journal he's telling prosecutors that, yes, what Cohen said is true, that Trump knew about the payments. The payments prosecutors say were illegal. President Trump has said he didn't know about the payments until later. Should schools be allowed to use federal money, federal grants, to buy guns, like to arm teachers? That's the question the education secretary is faced with right now. The Washington Post reports Texas and Oklahoma have asked her. Supporters say these grants leave the door open for school districts to use the money however they see fit in order to make schools safer. Critics, though, say the response to school shootings should be fewer guns, not more. The Post reports it is possible the Trump administration sort of ignores this request for now and doesn't respond one way or the other. Well, it wasn't really a cyber attack. It was all a test. That's the word now from the Democratic National Committee. Turns out what the DNC thought was someone trying to hack into its voter database earlier this week was actually the Michigan Democratic Party just testing the system. Yep, Michigan Democrats hired hackers to simulate an attack, but forgot to tell the National Committee about it. Oops. The state party chairman admitted it was a mistake, but defended efforts to test and improve cybersecurity. By the way, Google says it found some real cyber threats. Google is just the latest tech company this week to announce it found malicious accounts linked to Iran. So now Google says it deleted dozens of accounts on YouTube and other sites that were spreading false information. It's the same type of announcement we heard earlier this week from Facebook and Twitter. All eyes are still on Hurricane Lane impacting Hawaii. CBS News says the storm has been downgraded to a Category 3, but it is still bringing heavy rain, landslides, and flooding to the Big Island. And AccuWeather says the worst of it is expected into Saturday as Lane gets even closer to the islands. Officials say people should be ready for power outages and more flooding. A disaster declaration is already in place to make sure there are extra federal resources there ready to help. The last major storm to hit Hawaii like this was back in 1992. A quick break now to thank our sponsor. Have you heard of FabFitFun? I have to say, I had heard of this box before. I knew it would be good, but I was blown away with how much comes in it. I can now truly say it's the best subscription box I've ever gotten. So if you're not familiar with it, FabFitFun is a seasonal subscription box that will really make it feel like your birthday 4 times a year. It was so much fun getting this box in the mail. I was really surprised by how many quality products and full-sized products came with it. So the fall box includes a cute vegan leather tote, a beauty blender, Glam Glow beauty mask, and even a teapot or coffee press. The list goes on. I don't want to give away all the surprises. I personally love the variety. You get beauty, fitness, fashion, and lifestyle products all in one place. So this box is $49.99, and you get a value of more than $200. And you can use the coupon code Newsworthy to get $10 off your first box at fabfitfun.com. They will sell out, so be sure to go to fabfitfun.com, use the code Newsworthy, all one word, Newsworthy, and treat yourself to this fabulous fall box. All right, now back to the news. A new kind of art is about to make history: AI art. AI as in artificial intelligence. Fast Company reports it'll be the first time a major auction house will auction off computer-generated art. Here's how it was created. Artists in Paris gave a computer info on thousands of portraits, then used an algorithm to get the computer to create its own. The art is valued at $7,000 to $10,000. The creators say the money will go toward improving that algorithm to do it all again. The art goes on sale in October. So how about an artificial intelligence dog? Sony's robot dog named Aibo is coming back to the U.S. And it'll only cost you nearly $3,000. CBS News says the name Aibo, A-I-B-O, comes from artificial intelligence robot. This pet connects to your smartphone. The Verge says it has cameras to recognize your face and respond, and sensors to react when you pet it. Sony first introduced the robotic pet back in 1999. It was discontinued in 2006, and then Sony released a new version just in Japan earlier this year. Now, it's coming to the U.S. They'll go on sale here next month. LOL, NBD, WTF. You've probably heard of at least one of those, right? Like LOL, laugh out loud, or NBD, no big deal. Well, now Bloomberg reports the company Procter & Gamble wants to trademark those terms for cleaning and air freshening products. Apparently, it's trying to reach more millennials with the abbreviations. P&G is the largest consumer goods company in the world. We'll see if they're able to get the trademarks and if the potential new branding actually works. America's largest grocery store chain says it'll be getting rid of single-use plastic bags in all of its stores by the year 2025. USA Today has a statement from the CEO of Kroger. He says the company uses 100 billion plastic bags a year in the U.S., and it's time for a change. But he says it can't happen overnight, so they're giving customers time to adjust. Many major cities like L.A., Chicago, and Boston have already banned the use of plastic bags in any retail store. Oprah Pizza. It's happening. CNBC says Oprah Winfrey teamed up with Kraft to launch her own line of frozen pizzas. 1/3 of the pizza crust will be made with cauliflower, and 10% of all profits will be going to charities. Oprah already has a line of soups and side dishes, so this just adds to her food empire. And that's it. You are all caught up for today. Thanks so much again for listening. And don't forget to head on over to fabfitfun.com and use the code Newsworthy to get your subscription box. You can always read more about any of the stories that caught your attention today at thenewsworthy.com. Click episodes and find today's date. The Newsworthy is ready for you every day, Monday through Friday by 4 in the morning Eastern Time. So I'll be back with more news on Monday. Have a great weekend.
They were outnumbered, out-equipped, They had no chance of winning, but they had one huge advantage: General George Washington.
The fate of unborn millions will now depend, under God, on the courage and conduct of this army. We have to resolve to conquer or die.
Just as the leadership of one man helped form a nation, today leadership can transform the world. Leadership is in you. Now pass it on from passiton.com.
Today we decided to walk to school. The light counted. 15, 14...
41, 31, 13. We
took a left on Carroll Street. Danny's smart, but he gets distracted.
I
realized he forgot his homework. I hope he doesn't have another bad day at school.
When you can see learning and attention issues from their side, you can be on their side. That's why there's Understood.org, a free resource for the parents of the 1 in 5 kids with learning and attention issues. Go from misunderstanding to Understood.org. Brought to you by Understood and the Ad Council.
This is Betty White. I know you don't need one more thing to worry about, but listen, high blood pressure can cause kidney damage, blindness, heart attack, stroke, and you can have high blood pressure even if you feel all right. 1 in 7 adults has it, but it's easy to get your blood pressure checked, and you can treat it if it is too high. So don't worry about it, don't ignore it, just see your doctor and check it out.
For your free booklet, visit the Will Rogers Institute at wrinstitute.org and find us on Facebook and Twitter.
Early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise.
And all was Benjamin Franklin wise.
So you actually think electricity can pass through metal? Ha! Ben Franklin, go fly a kite.
Excellent idea. Where are my keys?
Besides the bifocals, Ben invented the Franklin stove, the odometer, oh, and the lightning rod. Ingenuity, pass it on. From the Foundation for a Better Life at values.com.
When severe weather strikes, it's important you're in the know. Even if power goes out and cellular networks are down, radio can be your lifeline. And Next Radio is the free app that brings FM radio right to your Android smartphone. No data or cellular network required, and it won't drain your battery. Go to the Google Play Store right now. Download the Next Radio app to your Android device. Stay tuned to this station, and please stay safe. For a full list of compatible devices, visit nextradioapp.com.
Heartland Newsfeed is looking for an advertising sales manager to sell advertising for the website. For more information, contact Jake Leonard at admin@heartlandnewsfeed.com.
From Keene in the Shire, the Liberty Media capital of the world, this is Daryl W. Perry, host of FPP Radio News for Friday, August 24th, 2018. Silver is trading at $14.67 per ounce. Gold is valued at $1,193 per ounce. Zencash is trading at $20, and the average price of Bitcoin is $6,524. Antiwar.com reports a day after both the Afghan government and U.S. government declined offers to attend, the Taliban has announced they have accepted Russia's invitation to a multinational peace talks to be held next month in Moscow. The Taliban issued a statement saying it is their intention to send a delegation led by the head of their political office, which is based in Qatar. The U.S. recently held talks with Taliban from that office. The Taliban's acceptance is a significant boost for the talks. Russia has reported inviting 12 nations to the talks, though as yet, we don't know which will be attending. Having the Taliban there will give the talks at least some meaning and credibility. The Afghan government has said that they want talks to be one-on-one with the Taliban and no external countries involved. The Taliban, by contrast, had said they believe they need assurances from other countries, particularly the United States, and don't think talks with the Afghan government by itself would be particularly meaningful. Zencash is now Horizon. Horizon is a privacy platform built on zero-knowledge technology with a decentralized secure node architecture. The Horizon platform enables real-life uses beyond currency, including the ability to privately chat with other people. Soon, Horizon will enable you to publish information and go anywhere on the web, all with complete privacy. Horizon, bringing privacy to life. Learn more at horizon.global. HORIZEN.global. UPI reports as California firefighters battled the largest fires in state's history, Verizon slowed wireless data speeds to a crawl, making it almost impossible for emergency personnel to use some of its high-tech tracking equipment. Santa Clara County Fire Chief Anthony Bowden said emergency personnel heavily rely on internet services to monitor fast-moving fires and coordinate resources. The fire department has an unlimited government plan with Verizon, but the company slowed or throttled data speeds once the agency reached a certain threshold, according to Bowden in an August 20th 50th court filing. Belden said the Internet has become an essential tool in providing fire and emergency response, particularly for events like large fires, which require the rapid deployment and organization of thousands of personnel and hundreds of fire engines, aircraft, and bulldozers. Keeping emergency personnel connected requires a lot of data. While battling the Mendocino Complex fire, Bowden said his department's mobile communications center sent and received 5 to 10 gigabytes of data through a wireless router daily. During that time, Verizon reduced speeds that slowed service of the equipment to dial-up speeds. Santa Clara County Fire Captain Bill Murphy told CNN simple tasks like sending an email or updating a Google document were almost impossible. You can support FPP Radio by joining the Fans program. Fans are friends, allies, and numerous supporters. Fans help FPP afford to produce more original content. You can join the Fans program for as little as $1 per month through Patreon and get perks like ad-free versions of FPP Radio News and Peace, Love, Liberty Radio. To learn more or to join the Fans program, visit fans.fppradio.com. Reuters reports a federal judge sentenced former U.S. intelligence contractor Reality Winner on Thursday to more than 5 years in prison after she admitted leaking a top-secret report on Russian interference in U.S. elections to a media outlet. Winner, who has spent already nearly 2 years in jail, pled guilty in June to passing the National Security Agency report to The Intercept in 2016. One of her attorneys, Titus Nichols, said Winner is receiving credit for the time she spent in pretrial confinement. During a hearing in Winner's hometown of Augusta, Georgia, Judge James Hall approved her lawyer's request for a 63-month sentence, followed by 3 years of supervised release, according to Nichols. It was one of the longest sentences ever given to someone for illegally disclosing government information, according to Nichols. Winner's attorneys said in a statement the sentence and accompanying plea agreement both reflect that Reality recognizes that actions have consequences and that she has learned from her mistakes and is prepared to accept the consequences of her actions. Winner admitted to intentionally printing a copy of the intelligence report in her office and mailing it to the news outlet. She was indicted on a single federal count of willful retention and transmission of national defense information, a felony under the Espionage and Censorship Act that carries a maximum sentence of 10 years in prison. Betsy Reed, editor-in-chief of The Intercept, said in a statement that Winner should be honored and that her sentencing and other prosecutions of whistleblowers were attacks on freedom of speech and of the press. This has been FPP Radio News, online at fppradio.com.
The game doesn't stop. Neither should you. Wherever you go, the game goes too using the enabled FM chip in your phone and the Next Radio app.
The Next Radio app brings real FM radio to your phone.
Just plug in your headphones and listen to the Next Radio app, and you'll save major data and battery life compared to streaming apps. And there are no blackouts, so you never miss the games you love played on your local FM radio station. Download the Next Radio app to enhance your radio listening experience. And keep going. With no blackouts and restrictions, the game follows you. Your favorite team, host, and commentator go with you.
The best thing is, it's all totally free. No subscriptions, no fees. Get off the sidelines and download the Next Radio app today, free.
Next Radio, live and local, wherever you go.
Do you need dental insurance? Then call Physicians Mutual Insurance Company for details. Not just a discount plan, real coverage for 350 procedures. Call 1-855-402-7556. Again, that's 1-855-402-7556. Offer is not available in Minnesota, Montana, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Rhode Island, Vermont, and Washington.
Do you or a loved one have a chronic condition such as diabetes, a heart condition, or asthma? Do you or a loved one have a severe allergy to a certain food, drug, or insect? If you answered yes to any of these questions, you are a candidate for an electronic medical alert watch, the alternative to the traditional medical ID bracelet. An electronic medical alert watch visibly communicates a person's health conditions, drug, food, and other allergies, and other critical information to help make a diagnosis and save a life. Take control of your health. Protect yourself or your loved ones and order an electronic medical alert watch today. Visit www.epill.com. That's epill.com. Affordable, free shipping, and a 30-day money-back guarantee. Remember www.epill.com. That's EPILL.com. ePill.
The Tom Woods Show, episode 1219.
Prepare to set fire to the index card of allowable opinion. Your daily dose of liberty education starts here. The Tom Woods Show.
Folks, in school we got a sanitized, upside-down version of the history of the U.S. presidents. Well, I'm going to bring you the real history. Check it out at freehistorycourse.com. Hi, everybody. Tom Woods here. Jeff Deist is with us. That's always a pleasure. Jeff is former chief of staff to Ron Paul and president of the Mises Institute. Always has valuable and interesting things to say. I wanted to continue the conversation not only about Alex Jones, but just about social media and big tech companies in general and what we and other folks are likely to face in the coming years and what the potential solutions are. Maybe say a little something about political correctness and its true nature. There were people not too long ago lecturing us that this was just a made-up right-wing concern, and it really is just about being polite to people. Well, maybe it's not. Maybe it really is just what we said it was all along. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Tom Woods, great to talk to you.
All right, we got a lot to talk about here. I did talk a bit about Alex Jones on my own in an episode and then with Michael Malice, but there's more to say here, and the story keeps developing. His website has been under attack. He was just suspended from Twitter, which was the one major holdout. He hasn't been banned from Twitter, but he got a 7-day suspension from Twitter. And I want to talk about the implications of all this. But before we do that, I just want to say something about Alex Jones himself and then get a little feedback from you. Now, I'm saying this as somebody who I've been on his show a couple of times. Once he had a guest host, but once was directly with him. And I even got him to laugh. And given his persona, that can be tricky sometimes. But I told a baby with the bathwater joke. And people say, okay, the Fed screwed up, but we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. And I said, you do when it's a demon baby. And that was just right up his alley. So anyway, but he's also made a few kind references to me. And so I've never had any personal problem with him. And on some things, he is certainly right. But the trouble is, he's clearly wildly speculative on really important questions time and again when there's no need to be wildly speculative. There's plenty of damaging stuff about the state already out there, so you don't have to go into this wild speculation. And the result is this weird hodgepodge where his followers, oftentimes when I meet them, some of them are good-hearted people, but they're ideologically all over the place. They don't know what they believe in because it's just what's the crazy theory of the day instead of having a lodestar, instead of having some kind of North Star to guide them. They haven't got that. They've got one guy's quirky personality instead of a consistent set of beliefs. Now, am I wrong about that?
Isn't it amazing, though? We don't just have scolds and killjoys today. We have outright censors. Would-be censors in the private sector. Imagine a bombastic guy like Alex Jones if Mencken was around. Wouldn't he enjoy the spectacle? I got to admit, I haven't followed Alex Jones the last few years. Did he actually say? I don't know. Does he say things like the Sandy Hook shooting didn't happen and it was a bunch of crisis actors? I don't know, but assuming he has said that, I've heard people intimate that he has. Yeah, that's a pretty bad thing to say, but do you want to live in a world where that's not okay? Where we can't even
hold on a minute. I want to make clear. I'm not in any way saying that he should be deplatformed or anything like that.
I know.
Not in any way.
I know you are.
But I do want to just say that this is the frustrating thing about him, that here's a guy with but on the other hand, here I am saying, here's a guy with a huge platform, but he doesn't have this consistent set of ideas. Maybe he got the platform because he doesn't have because he's wild and out there and provocative. Maybe, look, he's got a much bigger audience than I do, so far be it from me to say he's not doing it right from a marketing standpoint. But I am saying that as somebody who's a libertarian, it's just disappointing that somebody who can, who is willing to see such wickedness within the powers that be can't just follow that. He has to go off on weird tangents all the time. I'm just saying it frustrates me.
Sure, and if Americans have a sin, and they have many, it's not that we should be more credulous towards government. It's that we should be less. And when you talk about his audience, I took the time this morning to look up his Alexa ranking. Not only does he have a much bigger audience than you, Tom, no offense, he's got a much bigger audience than National Review or all kinds of websites. His Alexa ranking's in the 3,000s, which puts him up there near a lot of big news sites. So don't kid yourself about this guy. And look, he's done and said a lot of good things over the years about getting out of wars and worrying about the deep state, things that turned out to be true. And when it comes to conspiracy theories, let's not forget that sometimes you fast forward a few decades and what everyone was claiming was a conspiracy, let's say with respect to JFK, all of a sudden we're having congressional hearings. And it turns out that some of the officially sanctioned story wasn't true at all. So there's plenty of reasons for Americans to distrust the official line, not only coming from government, but also increasingly from the media overlords who want to agree with government. And here's the thing I would say about Alex Jones to people who want to ban him. Okay, take him off Facebook and Twitter if he's violated their terms of service. I'm okay with that. I don't like it. I think it's a bad thing. I think libertarians should object rather than cheer, which some of them have. But nonetheless, how far do we take this? In other words, if you say democracy is a good thing, and most people say that, even amongst libertarians, and some libertarians, of course, object to democracy as a way of organizing society. But let's say you say democracy in general is a good thing. The way Mises viewed it as a way to have an orderly transfer of political power without war. Okay, so you're going to limit his ability to participate in political discourse. Voting is not the only way to engage in democracy. There are lots of ways to engage in democracy: political activism, speaking out, public discourse, etc. So when you take away his major platforms, and this is where people meet today on social media, this is the town square of a sort. When you take that away from him, what you're basically doing is reducing his ability to participate as a citizen in democracy. Okay, but how far would we take that? Would you take the vote away from people who believe in Alex Jones's conspiracies? And would you take the vote away from him? Would you say, no, not only can you not be on Twitter or Facebook, you also can't vote because you're clearly not intelligent or rational enough to participate meaningfully or intelligently in the democratic process? Hey, I'm all for that. I'm all for restricting democracy and voting. I'm not a milquetoast libertarian. I think democracy is lousy. So how far are we going to take that? Are we going to have voting tests for people to see how current they are with what's going on with government and current events? Are we going to have news tests? Are we going to ask them to name the three branches of government, which I think about half of Americans can do? So this is a slippery slope. If you want to take away Alex Jones's platforms, ostensibly private, then what you're really saying is not everyone ought to be able to participate 100% in democracy. Some people are too crazy or too misguided, and we ought to restrict their power. Okay, that's a pretty good argument in a certain sense, but that's also an argument against democracy. So which is it? You can't have it both ways, Tom.
That is an excellent point. And these people, because democracy, well, their version of democracy is like a religion to them, there's no way they could bring themselves to say that. There's no way they could bring themselves to say Alex Jones can't vote. Even though they don't want him to vote, I don't see how they could continue to perpetuate their worldview.
Well, it is the most sacred of sacred cows, democracy. Of course, no one believes in it when the wrong guy wins or when Brexit wins. But here's the thing is the other sacred cows are falling. 30 years ago, everyone gave sacred cow lip service to free speech, whether they actually believed in it or not. They gave lip service to it. That's falling by the wayside. People used to give lip service to all kinds of things. It's a new age, Tom. So I'm not sure that some people at this point won't start suggesting that Alex Jones people can't vote. But it's funny to me to watch the same people, the same neoliberals, both parties, who have done nothing but champion democracy as what's turned the 20th century into this progressive era. All of a sudden saying, well, they're interfering with our democracy. So $400,000 worth of Facebook ads, supposedly, not proven, supposedly implemented by some Russian bots or hackers is enough to sway people's votes. If that's true, again, it's an argument against democracy and democratic voting as the means of organizing society. So I'm glad. Let's have a conversation about democracy and whether it works, but let's just not be hypocrites about it.
I sent out an email to my list. Now, I think the podcast audience is getting tired of this, but look, until you sign up for my email newsletter, I'm going to keep badgering you because it's really darn good. So you can get my ebook, Bernie Sanders is Wrong, while signing up. So go to bernieiswrong.com and hop on that list. Anyway, I sent out an email the other day about some collaboration going on between the American Enterprise Institute, which is neoconservative, and the Center for American Progress, which is a so-called progressive organization. And they've come together to say, look, the center has to hold here. We've got this wild lunatic in the White House, and he's saying things like NATO needs to be rethought or Brexit is a good thing. And when we have populists like this, they tend to undermine democratic institutions. Now, Brexit was decided democratically, by the dictionary definition. And it's just as you say, when the outcome isn't what they want, then they say democracy is being strangled or destroyed. But no, it just means that people disagree with you. So they have to, once they've made their bed, it seems to me, by throwing in with democracy, they have to sleep in it unless they're going to look ridiculous. So there's that. There's the idea that Brexit is kind of weirdly undemocratic, or it would be undemocratic to scale back commitments to NATO or something. What does that even have to do with democracy? Until you realize that for them, democracy means either rule by the American elite or rule by some approved elite somewhere. That's what it always means. Spreading democracy around the world always means being willing to comply with the demands of the U.S. elite. That's what it always means.
And it also means political cover for them. If Hillary had won an overwhelming victory, neoconservatives in both parties would be saying, see, this is the people's mandate. So democracy is there to provide cover for the political class and to say, we're your employees. You voted for us. We're just here as your servants and agents, which, of course, is a farce. But nonetheless, it makes them a little uncomfortable when the cover is blown, so to speak. And that's what's happened here, because if people are really so feeble-minded that just hearing some misapprehensions about what will happen after Brexit, or hearing some misapprehensions about Trump versus Hillary is enough to sway their little mousy votes, then they shouldn't be voting. So, where are we here in democracy? And as you say, though, it's going to be tough to turn the rhetoric 180, because that social democracy is, democratic voting was the linchpin of the statist narrative in the 20th century. That was what gave government its veneer of respectability and consent. And when you take that away, when you say, well, we have to limit it in certain ways, which, of course, the Constitution attempted to do, it attempted to ameliorate direct democracy, then you're getting into some interesting conversations. And it's been fun to see Hillary, for example, have a year or 2 year long meltdown about democracy, when if she had just won, if she'd gotten a few 100,000 more votes in places like Florida, we'd be sitting here talking about how the American people are actually pretty wise and that they really couldn't be fooled by this huckster.
And democracy worked the way it was supposed to.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, my gosh. We'd be saying, see, at the end of the day, the American people are quite sensible.
Right. Yeah.
And it's 400,000 votes out of a country, in the Electoral College anyway, out of a country of 320 million is enough to send us into this absolute psychosis. I mean, what a farce.
All right. So what we've observed happening is, of course, an attack on Alex Jones. But then other things have happened before and since. Gavin McInnes was yanked from Twitter. And if you saw, he did a funny video where he actually did a screenshot of the email that Twitter sent him. You have been suspended from Twitter, which suspended, as he points out, doesn't mean what it meant when you went to school, and suspended means you're out of school for 3 days. Their suspended means you're never coming back. And then they say because you violated our terms of service, specifically this. And then it's blank. So which is and then they go on to say, now, if you try to start another account, we're going to ban that too. But it's specifically, and it's blank, which to me, yeah, okay, it could be a computer glitch, but I think it's Twitter demonstrating its raw power. Like we're gonna be in your face, ostentatiously in your face, about how we don't even need to give you a reason. And in fact, we're going to just leave the reason area. We won't just excise that from the email. We're going to say, here's the place we could have given you a reason, We've chosen not to.
Well, I have to give a little bit of a mea culpa here because I'm one of those kind of libertarians who 5 or 10 years ago would have been saying, look, corporate power is irrelevant. The only relationship that you have to worry about that's involuntary is your relationship with the state, let's say the IRS. And these are private companies. These are private platforms. If you don't like it, go build your own platform. And I still agree with that. I still don't want the government to censor the internet. I don't want government to control social media platforms, even when many of those providers have nefarious relationships with government at all levels. They're providing cloud services to federal agencies. They're helping NSA and CIA snoop on us. They are acting sometimes deplatforming people at the behest of governments. If you recall, a few years ago, Zuckerberg had a conversation with Angela Merkel in Europe where he assured her that he would take some people off Facebook who were pushing back about immigration in Germany. So let's not kid ourselves that these aren't deeply state-connected actors. Nonetheless, that said, I still don't want to see government cracking down on them and forcing them to bring Alex Jones or Gavin McInnes back. But we have to realize the environment we're in. There is what I call a state linguistic complex. It's very scary. It's very authoritarian, and it is attempting to silence people. So this is part of a bigger, broader trend of the last 30 or 40 years. It's always been around, but we can call it, for lack of a more precise term, PC, political correctness, which is nothing short of an attempt to create officially sanctioned thought. I noticed Michael Malice said something the other night about, look, this will never go away. Progressives have been doing this since the French Revolution was his example. And that's true. But it seems to me libertarians ought to push back. And this takes a lot of forms. There's not just deplatforming. There's shadow banning. There's people snitching on each other at work. There's doxing people's address, all that sort of thing. Mobbing people in restaurants. And it has very real-world consequences. You can lose your job. You can lose your career, your friends, your reputation, your ability to make money. So it's not something that we should cheer, even when it's not direct state action. And I recall very clearly a dear, dear friend of mine, Kent Snyder. Some of your listeners might know his name. He was Ron Paul's he worked on the 1988 Ron Paul campaign, and he also was instrumental in getting Ron to run in 2008. Which was something Ron really thought was a little bit of an outlandish idea at the time. Kent unfortunately passed away not long after that. But he told me, and he also said this to Lou Rockwell, Lou was a big internet guy early on, in the late 90s, early 2000s, made sure that LRC and Mises.org were both early on platforms available online. And Lou was a huge fan of Google and Gmail. He thought that this was just a wondrous company. And of course, in many ways it is. And I remember Kent saying, this is going to take a bad turn. Google has too much power. And both Lou and I were a little dismissive of that at the time. This probably would have been somewhere in the mid-2000s. But here we are today. I mean, these companies are actively engaged in trying to narrow speech and thought and to silence people who are giving unallowed opinions. We can't kid ourselves about this. So I admit that I underestimated, in this sense, corporate power, and that it's a problem, and it's something we ought to push back against. Personally, I don't want to see censorship by the state. Obviously, that's unconstitutional if you care about that sort of thing. But I also don't want to see antitrust applied to these companies. I would much rather see a tort theory applied. In other words, if Alex Jones has been harmed, sue him. There's already a tort called interference with contract and tortious interference with business arrangements. I think these kinds of theories could be explored. And more importantly, if social media platforms are picking and choosing who gets to say what, and clearly they are, okay, left versus right, but there's clearly a left-wing bias here. They are silencing voices on the right. They're not silencing Sarah Jiang. Then they are, in effect, taking on an editorial function. They're saying that certain speech, we're not just a platform like the telephone book, we're taking on a bit of an editorial function. I think once they do that, and once that becomes provable, then they are moving into the area of potential defamation lawsuits. They can't just say anymore, hey, we don't participate we just let people say whatever they want. Therefore, we can't be held responsible for any kind of tort liability. Well, I think that might go by the wayside. There might be a court out there that wants to hear a lawsuit against a social media company who's actively engaged in silencing someone. So, we live in interesting times. The answer is not heavy-handed government. The answer is, of course, building new platforms and that sort of thing. It's tough to do, pretty tough to replace Facebook. But here we are, Tom. And you know what? What's interesting to me is that we always feel like as libertarians, we have to have the perfect solution, the airtight solution that will solve all problems. Oh, just privatize X or just create new Y. And of course, life isn't always that simple. And this is, frankly, a fair critique of libertarianism, which is that it's overly simplified. No, it's not overly simplified. It just says that human beings sometimes have to muddle through things. And the best way for them to do so is with private solutions where government's not involved, where there's actual skin in the game, where there's profit and loss signals for the actors. And that produces the best, though imperfect, result for all. And I think we're in sort of that stage with the internet. So I don't join those who want to say, well, look at you silly libertarians. Look what social media platforms are doing to you. Ha, 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 where's your market? I'm not ready to join in that, but I'm also ready to say that this is an unholy melding of corporate and state power, and that we ought to fear it. And it's illiberal. It's illiberal, and it's a form of political correctness that we ought to oppose.
Why don't we take just a minute to say something nice about a really nice development on the internet, and that is one of my favorite services of all, Skillshare, which has been a wonderful sponsor of this show. This is a place where they've got now over 22,000 classes in all kinds of areas that can give you a leg up in your job or help you start a side hustle or even your own business. We're talking about courses in design, business, technology, photography, entrepreneurship, film, writing, and then classes on small areas of that one field. So how to mix music or how to use Illustrator. Remember, as I keep emphasizing, the internet can do a tremendous amount of good for you, and Skillshare is just such a great example. And they've got a terrific offer for my listeners. Get 2 months of Skillshare for just 99 cents. Skillshare is offering Tom Woods Show listeners 2 months of unlimited access to over 22,000 classes for just 99 cents. To sign up, go to Skillshare.com/Woods. Again, Skillshare.com/Woods to start your 2 months now. That's Skillshare.com/Woods. Now, Jeff, I know this is not the best example to cite, but it's still something. The other day, I just wanted to know, what arguments could the Sandy Hook people have? People, if they are making that argument, I just wanted to know out of curiosity, what is the basis of the claim? Because it does seem like we have real live parents talking about this, so I don't see how they would do it. So I typed in Sandy Hook hoax. And you know how Google tries to anticipate what you're going to type in as you're typing it? So I type in Sandy Hook, and there are 8 million possible things that come after. But of course, hoax is not even there, even though I am sure there must be hundreds of places that would say that. So I started typing in HOA. Again, no recognition of this. Clicked it, nothing. It's all just general stories about Sandy Hook, refutations of the Sandy Hook theories. It was page 10 where I finally actually found somebody, I think it was InfoWars, which was down at the time, making whatever the heck the case is. Now, I'll grant you, I say this is not the best example because I'm fairly certain that that's not a sound argument. But wow, but that's just Orwellian, that people, you're too stupid. So we've already sifted that out just to tell you how stupid that is. It's particularly creepy because when people were trying to lead us into the war in Iraq on equally preposterous grounds, if you ask me, I didn't see the search engines actively suppressing war propaganda to try to, in the service of peace. The war propaganda was the first thing to come up. And if anything, the people who were, arguing against it might have been slightly buried. I don't know. Maybe Google wasn't in that business just yet. But you see my point. They're not going to do this to the powers that be when their lies have vastly greater real-world significance than whatever Alex Jones is saying on a particular day.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, a lot of people might type Tom Woods into Google and find you right at the top of the results. It wouldn't take much for Google to simply disappear you to the 10th page of results or disappear you altogether. You probably have some organic traffic where people actually type directly into their browser, but that would undoubtedly harm you if Google made that decision. And there's no clear successor to Google. Some of the other search engines, DuckDuckGo, et cetera, are not as technically adept, regardless of whether they're less censorious in their approach. So these companies have the ability to harm you and to disappear you. And this was my point when I gave a talk a week or so ago at the Federalist Society, is that PC is real, and it's time for us to stop acting like it's not. I mean, is it just a coincidence, Tom, that 99% of people who work at big tech companies happen to agree with an officially sanctioned line about whatever's happening, Trump versus Hillary? I mean, no, that's not just a coincidence. This is the result of a real attempt to channel thinking into certain avenues and to squelch speech. I mean, this is a very real animal we're dealing with. And after everything that's happened in the past couple of years, I don't ever want to hear anyone tell me, oh, Jeff, that, because I gave a speech on PC a couple of years ago in Dallas. I think it was 2015, actually, long time ago. And I don't ever want to hear anybody again say, oh, Jeff, you're just overreacting. There's no such thing as PC. It's just people using appropriate words or not being mean to others or not using certain slurs and this and that. No, that's not true. It's very real and it exists. It can be amorphous, but the thing about it is that we often apply it ourselves without even knowing, without even thinking about it, because we live in this gotcha world now. So it's very scary. The scariest form of censorship is self-censorship. And, when you look on your social media feed and you see people attacking each other and doxing each other and trying to get people fired, that tends to have a sobering effect on people. It tends to make them keep their opinions to themselves. And I think that this is why there was such disbelief when Trump won. Because I think millions and millions of Americans who are kind of tired of the left and tired of PC, and they probably weren't all that thrilled by Trump. They might have preferred a Ted Cruz or whatever, but nonetheless, they were a little worried about where the left in this country, where progressives are going. And so the one thing you can do without anybody knowing, at least for the moment, is go vote anonymously. So they did, and it shocked the left. It's still causing them to have spasms. In other words, they have to have an explanation of why Hillary lost. And it can't just be that she was a lousy candidate or that people don't like the things that she has to say or that the left increasingly represents. That can't be the answer, because they've been operating under this doctrine of inevitability, that progressivism has an arc and it's part of a greater historical arc, and it's arching upwards. And so Trump just couldn't happen. There's no way that was legitimate. So they've created all these explanations to salve their own psychology, whether that's Russian interference or whatever it might be. And I think PC is part of this, that you're not allowed to think certain ways. And if you do, you ought to be outside of the bounds of polite society. Now, this is something that libertarians shouldn't poo-pah and that we should be aware of and that we should think is real, because who's next? I mean, that's always the question, isn't it? Who's next? And it could be Tom Woods' show.
Yeah. Now, I tend to think that it's not that likely that I'll have this problem. But I do think it's now, as of over the past month or so, I now think it's 10% more likely than I thought it was before. But I think they would have to peel a number of other layers of the onion first before they get to me. And I think I'm such small potatoes to them that I don't think it would really be worth their while. But just to say, on the other hand, sometimes small fries are peeled off because they figured nobody's going to notice or care. Yeah. So there's always that too.
Well, it's true. And to an extent, they might like having libertarians around if we're not too much of a threat. This has always been argued in libertarian circles. If we ever got too big, or a Libertarian Party candidate ever got too many votes or something, and all of a sudden we'd find them cracking down on us much harder. So it remains to be seen. But the bottom line is that there's nothing in being libertarian that requires us to mythologize what's going on around us. We can observe things with a clear eye. And one thing we need to do is get over this fetish, this atavistic fetish that libertarians have always had of saying, well, we're neither left nor right. Well, of course that's true in the political sense, but there's all kinds of cultural and social things going on around us where the left is worse or the right is worse. So right here, right now, at this point in U.S. history and in the West, the left is worse on speech. They just are. And so, in other words, this is why I think people like me and people like Tom Woods are often, oh, you guys are always criticizing the left and your right-wingers. Well, we got to call them as we see them, and we just have to get over this weird obsession with saying we're neither right nor left. That's entirely true, but it's also oftentimes irrelevant. And what it's done is it has allowed progressives to frame the debate, because we don't even understand the degree to which progressives owned the 20th century. They took over basically everything. The one thing that they haven't taken over is some voters and government in red states. That's how we got Trump. That's how we still have Republican governors and some kind of right-wing legislatures. But they really control virtually everything in the United States, and that tends to have an effect, again, on narrowing what we say and do. And so if we're not even allowed to recognize that progressives control Fortune 500 companies, that progressives control the Catholic Church, they control all mainline Protestant denominations, they control virtually all synagogues, they control cultural arts, they control education, not just K through 12, but academia. If we're not media, certainly, if we're not allowed to fess up to the reality around us, we just end up tilting at windmills. And so if progressives took the size and scope of the state from 10 to 100, let's say, over the 20th century, and we come along and say, oh, I'd like to move it from 100 to 98, we accept being labeled as right-wing reactionaries as a result, that seems silly to me. Or what if we just say, well, it went from 10 to 100. I want it to go from 100 to 105 a little slower than progressives do. Oh, you're a right-wing reactionary. We have to have the guts, Tom, to not worry about what people think or the labels they apply. I don't care if somebody thinks I'm a right-winger. I'm anti-state. I don't think government should control society. To me, that is the essence of libertarianism. So I'm not concerned if someone wants to say, oh, you're just against PC because you must be actually a crypto closet right-winger. That's absurd and it's silly. But more importantly, it diverts us. Libertarians have allowed themselves to be diverted away from the big picture items, which is the economic fallacies that plague this country and that plague the West and that are going to bring us into some very unpleasant circumstances soon if we're not careful. So, we got to keep our eye on the ball and we got to call a spade a spade. And right now, when it comes to speech, when it comes to political correctness, when it comes to discourse, the left is worse and we have to recognize it.
Just as we're talking, Jeff, I just saw this notification from Stefan Molyneux, who says, and just to interject here, there are people who don't like him and there are people who don't like me because I talk to him or I've had him on. But those people can go jump in a lake because I'm sick and tired of, you're not allowed to talk to this. I will talk to anybody I darn well please. Okay, so shut your mouth. Anyway, Molyneux says, within 24 hours, my YouTube channel has received 2 community guidelines strikes, likely as a result of a mass flagging campaign, and is now on the verge of total deletion. Now, I don't know how many millions of views he's had, but it's astronomical how many millions of YouTube views he's had. Please respectfully contact @Team YouTube, this is Twitter, and alert them to this injustice. And then he posts a graphic of some further text about this where he explains what's being targeted. And he says, I've poured 12 years of my life into my YouTube channel with thousands of videos, hundreds of thousands of subscribers, and hundreds of millions of views. And he says, as it stands, I am unable to publish to YouTube for 2 weeks. Today, my channel hangs by a thread and could be destroyed at any moment. Whether it survives is not up to me, since I've always striven to tell the truth. And then he's asking people to help him out. Now, it seems to me that there has to be somewhere on this earth a group of entrepreneurs and a group of potential customers, all of whom believe that it is not the job of a social media platform to be your hectoring mother. That is not why it exists. And if people start complaining, oh, there's an offensive video, I want a company that says, okay, crybaby, take your business elsewhere because this is where the adults are talking. it seems to me there has to be people who are willing to say, yep, we're hosting it, whether we agree with it or not, because somewhere on this earth there has to be free discussion, and we're it. Somewhere there has to be somebody was joking, maybe it could be notyourmother.net or something. And I mean hosting companies, I mean all down the line, where they say, if you're going to complain to us that we've got some nasty people who have a website on our service, it's not our job to monitor their behavior, their politeness and civility and the reliability of their information. We're just a web hosting company. What people want to do with their hosting, as long as it's not illegal, is fine with us. Period. Go take your crybaby story somewhere else. Am I living in a fantasy world to think that's conceivable?
Well, certainly not technologically. It's very difficult to go out on your own, as we saw with Glenn Beck, for example. He left Fox and tried to go to a subscription model, and he had 3 million viewers per night, and he thought if he could just walk 300,000 of them over to a $10 a month platform, he'd be in business. He spent a ton of his own money building out apparently a very nice studio and all that sort of thing, and it just didn't really work. And so it's all about the network effects. It's all about getting your voice out there where people are actually listening to it. I'm sure a lot of people would walk over to an alternate like Vimeo or something if Molyneux decided to do that. I don't follow him. I don't know anything about him because I had always heard that he was kind of into psychology or peaceful parenting or something. That doesn't interest me. But I think he could walk some of his audience over. But look, this is a cautionary tale. The Mises Institute has a robust YouTube channel. We have a lot of videos on there, and every one of them we have the original feed. We could recreate it. It would be a bear, and we'd be certainly put out if YouTube dropped us. But we have all the content. We have it in our own files. So we could recreate those videos on Mises.org without sending people out to YouTube. So increasingly, you got to get some server space and you got to put your content on something you control. If you're doing let's say a WordPress site, host it yourself. Don't put it up on WordPress. This is, you got to take action and control it. And I can't imagine that someone as big as Molyneux in the video world doesn't have backups, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, he may, but the trouble is this. I can't tell you how many people have said they found me because they were on YouTube looking at something else. And then in the recommended videos, they saw one of mine. And now that, and there are many other disadvantages to being taken off YouTube, but that's a major one. You see an interesting looking video recommended for you, you click on it, you watch it, you become a fan of that person. So it's true, he could bring the audience, but the ability to build organically and spontaneously on this big platform would be severely compromised. I mean, I don't need to tell you this. So I'm going ahead and, like all civilized people, I'm retweeting this to see what we can do here. But I just feel like now's not the time to be. I know I started the episode by scolding Alex Jones a little bit, but that was just to make clear my frustration that the guy gets the wickedness of the state, but he has to express it in ways that are so bizarre half the time that it's sort of unhelpful, at least from my standpoint. But it seems to me now is not the time to be hectoring people who are on the verge of being disappeared. Oh, well, you said politically incorrect thing. You know what? If we don't stand up for those people unambiguously, we are going to regret that later. I mean, even if it weren't the right thing to do in and of itself, we're going to regret that later. And I mean, anybody who's going to start this kind of process where this one's gone, then that one's gone, then that one's gone, you think they're going to spare you just because you were a quisling? You think they're going to spare you because you tattletailed on somebody? Then you don't know how these people work. I mean, did you not see how the French Revolution developed? I mean, the early people of the French Revolution who were we're the responsible ones in the French Revolution, so we'll be fine. Yeah, they're all dead by the end of it.
Well, we need Walter Block here. Libertarians have always defended people on the fringes of society, whether that would be a sex worker, a prostitute, or that would be a drug user, as long as it's they're engaged in consensual activity with no victim beyond themselves or their cohorts. Libertarians have never shied away from defending the undefendable and even the unseemly. And if Alex Jones doesn't fall into that category, then I'm not sure what to say, because he's speaking words. He's not physically assaulting someone other than the guy from the Young Turks, which I thought was kind of I think that was mutual combat, maybe. But this is where we are, and if speech is a core part of liberty, and if ideas are a core part of liberty, then we have to accept the good with the bad. And that means I'm perfectly happy to hear from communists and socialists all day long. And the price you pay for that is that an Alex Jones of the world might come along and say some things that make you uncomfortable. I'm certainly would rather live in a rough and tumble Wild West of absolute free speech than what is starting to come in the West. And don't kid yourself. Hate speech laws are headed to the United States. They exist throughout Europe. They exist in Canada. This is where we're headed. So right now, Tom, nobody comes along and puts Alex Jones in jail. Nobody from the government comes along and puts Alex Jones in a prison cell and says the First Amendment no longer applies to hate speech. What you've said about the Sandy Hook incident is hateful. A jury of your peers found you guilty. Spend some time in the slammer and, let the Supreme Court wrestle with whether the underlying hate speech bill passes constitutional muster. God knows what they might say about that. Okay, so the government's not doing that in the United States yet. The question we have to ask ourselves are we emboldening it in that direction? And number two, are we imprisoning people in a de facto sense? If someone loses their job and their life falls apart and they can't find employment because of, let's say, a reckless tweet, okay, the government hasn't put them in jail, but the life around them has shrunk down, not to jail cell size, but it's shrunk. They have fewer opportunities. Perhaps they make less money. They have fewer friends. Their life is in a smaller box than it used to be. So we've imprisoned them in a bit of a metaphorical sense. So, these are serious things. And if we're about human liberty and flourishing, that's what we're about at the end of the day, is what is truthful, because we always have to first and foremost worry about truth, because truthfulness comports with human nature. And our political ideology, our philosophy ought to comport with human nature. So number one is what is true, regardless of anyone's feelings or thoughts or offense. And number two is how do we apply that to human flourishing? How do we make society better, richer, healthier, wealthier, etc.? Those are the kinds of macro questions libertarians ought to be asking. And what we're doing to, in a sense, in a weird sense, the least among us, like an Alex Jones, mirrors the way we ought to care about charity and the poor and that sort of thing. In terms of reputation, which is a form of wealth, Alex Jones is the least among us. So, again, before you want to jump on the bandwagon bashing him, take a look in the mirror and say, am I next?
Incidentally, Noam Chomsky even came out and said that Alex Jones shouldn't be deplatformed. So that makes him better than some of our compatriots. Let's put it that way, at least on this. Even Noam Chomsky is saying, look, people, for heaven's sake, this is stupid. Then you gotta really look at yourself. All right, we'll leave it there, Jeff. I'm going to link to the talk you gave at the Federalist Society not too long ago over at tomwoods.com/1219, our show notes page for today. I'll link to a couple of episodes where I've talked about this and where I've talked about alternative social media platforms. I mean, for the time being, I'm staying put. I'm going to stay put on any place I can reach an audience, and I think you'd be silly not to do that. Anywhere you can get an audience, you should go. And even if something ever were to happen to me, I would not say to all my friends, in solidarity with me, you got to get off that platform. That'd be stupid. I want people to reach people. So as long as that can still be done, I'm going to be there. But I'll also look into alternatives as well. So, Jeff, thanks a lot. Hope we can talk again soon.
All right, Tom.
All right, folks, remember, Jeff is joining us on this year's Contra Cruise. Are you kidding me? A cruise with Bob Murphy and me and Jeff, and then Naomi Brockwell, whom you've gotten to know, and Brett Venat, and some wonderful other folks as well. It's always great and a ton of fun. So make sure and sign up soon at ContraCruise.com. Also, make sure and check out my friends over at Free Talk Live. They are doing a great libertarian call-in show 7 days a week. They're all over terrestrial radio, and you can listen to them via podcast. They're doing great work bringing a lot of so-called normies into this movement of ours, reaching people we might not otherwise be able to reach. So check them out at listen.freetalklive.com. All right, that'll do it for today. See you tomorrow.
Become a smarter libertarian in just 30 minutes a day. Visit TomWoods.com to subscribe to the show for free, and we'll see you next time.
The Samsung Galaxy Note 9 is the most powerful Note ever. And it's available now, which means you can start streaming, downloading, and posting faster than ever with a crazy fast network connection. Get the Galaxy Note 9 now at Samsung.com.
Okay, let's see how many stories we can cover. The AJC this morning. Women are paying more than men for deodorant. Oh, and perfume for you men out there who buy perfume. Let's get some Democrats elected so we can set up a federal office of price gender equality. Chucky Schumer wants to delay the Senate vote on Judge Brett Kavanaugh because Michael Cohen has pled guilty. Any reason would be good enough for Chucky Schumer. A lump in his grits would do it. I hate lumps in my grits. Visa and MasterCard are cutting off payments to conservative organizations. Why? Well, all it takes is that Southern Poverty Law Center in Alabama to label you a hate group. Censorship of any conservative thought really gaining steam. Following the murder of Molly Tibbetts in Iowa, people are saying, hey, don't blame all illegal immigrants for the crimes of just one. I like the person who responded, well, hey, don't blame everybody in the NRA for the crimes of somebody who wasn't even a member. Viewers to CNN have dropped about 23 to 25% just over the last year. I cannot imagine why. Obama was in South Africa in July, and he praised the South African leader for inspiring great hope and leadership. This week, this South African leader started seizing white-owned farms with no compensation. Article, New York Times, How Can I Cure My White Guilt? I'm sure you all want to read that one. And let's end with some good news. In Sweden, the rape capital of Europe, the Alternative for Sweden party wants to send back all migrants, that means Muslims, who refuse to work. Glimmer of hope. Solomon Brothers Studios, Naples. Have a great weekend. This is Neil Bortz.
The Samsung Galaxy Note 9 is the most powerful Note ever. And it's available now, which means you can start streaming, downloading, and posting faster than ever with a crazy fast network connection. Get the Galaxy Note 9 now at Samsung.com.
BBC News with Sue Montgomery. Spain's cabinet has passed a decree authorising the removal of the remains of the fascist dictator, General Francisco Franco, from a monument to those who died in the country's civil war. The general was laid to rest in the Basilica at the Valley of the Fallen after his death in 1975. The Deputy Prime Minister, Carmen Calvo, explained the decision.
Del lugar donde están las víctimas de la contienda.
To have the victims of the disappeared in the same place as where Franco is held is completely unacceptable for a democracy like ours. A tomb of state and a public place for heritage are completely incompatible, and it lacks respect for the victims.
130 parliamentarians from Southeast Asia have urged the UN Security Council to take Myanmar to the International Criminal Court over its treatment of the Rohingyas. The call comes a year after the Myanmar security forces drove more than 700,000 Rohingyas into Bangladesh in what the UN called textbook ethnic cleansing. The Republican senator and former U.S. presidential candidate John McCain has decided not to continue his treatment for aggressive brain cancer. Senator McCain, who's represented Arizona since 1987, first revealed that he was seriously ill a year ago. The military veteran, who spent years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam, will be 82 next week. Chris Buckler reports from Washington.
For more than 3 decades, John McCain has been a significant voice in Congress. He may at one time have been a Republican presidential candidate, but he's never been afraid to speak out against the party, and he's been a harsh critic of Donald Trump, even during his illness. Last year, Mr. McCain was diagnosed with glioblastoma, an aggressive form of brain cancer. In a statement, his family said, with his usual strength of will, he had chosen to stop receiving medical treatment, and they thanked the thousands of people who they said were keeping him in their prayers.
The Constitutional Court of Zimbabwe has upheld the election victory of President Emerson Mnangagwa, paving the way for his inauguration. It dismissed an appeal by the opposition leader Nelson Chamisa, who'd alleged there was widespread rigging in last month's vote. Shinganyoka is in Harare.
The uncertainty that has hung over this nation for weeks has finally been resolved in the Constitutional Court. The majority of judges ruled that the main opposition's Nelson Chamisa had not provided adequate proof or evidence of ghost voting and inflated numbers in favor of his rival, Emerson Mnangagwa. Mr. Mnangagwa is now expected to be inaugurated within 48 hours. And while he's received legitimacy from the courts, he still faces an uphill task of uniting a deeply divided nation.
World News from the BBC. World Football's governing body FIFA has given the head of the Palestinian Football Association a year-long suspension from matches after he called for protests targeting the Argentine star Lionel Messi. Jibril Rajoub has urged football fans to burn shirts and pictures of Messi ahead of a planned game between Argentina and Israel in Jerusalem. South Africa's former Deputy Finance Minister, Mcebisi Jonas, has alleged that a member of the influential Gupta family threatened to kill him. He said the threat came after AJ Gupta offered him more than $40 million to take the position of Finance Minister and advance the Gupta's business interests. Here's the BBC's Pumsa Filani.
It's the most explosive revelation yet in the long-awaited inquiry which began in South Africa's main city, Johannesburg, earlier this week. The alleged threat came after a meeting where the businessman offered Mr. Jonas a bribe to take up the post of finance minister, and he refused. He testified that Mr. Zuma's son, Duduzane, who was a business partner of the Guptas at the time, had also been present at the meeting. The former president, his son Duduzane, and the Guptas have denied any wrongdoing.
Australia's new Prime Minister Scott Morrison has said he'll work to reunite the country and its governing Liberal Party. He was sworn in hours after his predecessor, Malcolm Turnbull, was forced out of office. He's the country's sixth Prime Minister in less than 10 years. Mr. Turnbull has said he'll resign from Parliament. The United States says it's deeply concerned about the treatment of journalists in China. The statement comes after the American BuzzFeed reporter Megha Rajagopalan found she was unable to renew her journalist visa to China. She has previously reported extensively on Beijing's security crackdown in the region of Xinjiang. BBC News.
Do you need dental insurance? Then call Physicians Mutual Insurance Company for details. Not just a discount plan. Real coverage for 350 procedures. Call 1-855-402-7556. Again, that's 1-855-402-7556. Offer is not available in Minnesota, Montana, New Hampshire, New Mexico, Rhode Island, Vermont, and Washington.